All right, we are live. Hey, friends, welcome back to the channel. This evening, I have Alan from the Library of Alexandria on the channel with me. And I'm very excited to finally get a chance to talk to him on my channel. Oh, sorry, this is Jimmy. Sorry, I get you guys confused sometimes. So Jimmy Nuts.
I was just going to go full
Nuttwork.
in on the
I know.
Alan.
I almost thought about just letting you do a full on Alan well, okay, Alan, welcome to the channel.
Christina! Christina!
Perfect.
Why is that baby crying? There, that's Alan. I would have done the entire stream as if I was Alan.
I mean, we could like do a part 2 of this, and I could say that Alan's coming on the channel and even put his face on the thumbnail and just have you show up.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. Let's do it.
It really would. I'd put my arm in a sling and ruffle up my hair a little bit and have a video game, pause screen on in my background.
Have your Zaxby's over here.
My Zach attack. Yes, yep. I could do it. I could definitely do it.
Oh, 100%. Zin's down for it. Let's go. Well, thank you for coming on the channel. Finally, I feel like this is a bit overdue. When I was watching the Chatting with Nuts episode, that was almost a year and a half ago, which is wild.
Was it really?
Yeah, which is wild. And one of the things that I wanted to mention right away is we talked about so many book series in that show that I had not read. And the whole time I was like, I don't know what to say about that one either. I haven't read it. Well, I don't know what to say about that one either because I haven't read it. I have now read most of the series that you brought up in that live stream. So we're going to have to now return to some of those. This
pleases me greatly. When I have guests on, I always try to have a good idea of what they've read to talk about. Cause like no one likes to be like, oh, I haven't read that. I have not read that. Oh, I also have not read that. But sometimes, I don't always get around to getting a checklist.
Exposed.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I somehow pressured you maybe a little bit.
Well, it was weird because most of the series that you brought up were on my TBR for the rest of the year anyways. So it just kind of worked out perfectly. Like, I'd love to give you the credit for that, but I can't.
I mean, to be fair, it's not like, I read a lot of weird stuff, but like, I think the stuff that is like non-typical.
We're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, stuff that's non-typical is not stuff that like a lot of people in the fantasy community are going to race to put on their TBRs. So I would say my fantasy reads are mostly typical.
Yeah.
Which, whatever. I'm basic. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I feel like I have a lot of basic book opinions.
Yeah.
Like, so guys, every stream, Jimmy, every stream that I don't wear a beanie, I get yelled at. Every single one. And I don't know how to explain to these people that it is summertime outside.
Hey,
it's
you gotta
hot
stay
in
on
here.
brand. You gotta stay on brand. There are beanie crusaders out there that
it's true.
just never take it off.
It's true. I'm not going to wear a beanie in a lot of my videos for a few months, guys. I'm sorry. Minnesota has such a small window of not cold. Just like, let me have this moment. Okay.
What is it about the beanie that, like, did you just see one day and you're like, this is it?
Well, I've always really liked beanies, but I found, so I'm a massive Red Rising fan, which is not like a secret. And so I remember finding, I wanted some Red Rising merch. And so I, was looking on Google and I found the Howler beanie. I was like, that's sick. I want to get that. So I got it. And then I started wearing it in my videos because I thought it was really cool. And before I knew what was happening, that had become the unofficial icon of my channel. And it went so far as to give me people were giving me nicknames. I'm now Tori the Barbarian Beanie Queen in like so many discords. Like,
Beanie Queen's pretty good. I like that.
Beanie Queen's pretty good. Yeah, that one's pretty common. I think part of it was I also captained a readathon I think right during when we talked last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the Beanie Barbarians. And so now I have a whole bunch of people that were in my readathon team that kind of started calling me Beanie Queen and,
yeah, you definitely need to sell beanies.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, you should definitely do that because that's very unique to you.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't really think about it, but I guess I suppose that I do think I associate you with a beanie. I guess I do. I like the snapback though. I think the snapback's better personally.
Yeah, it's a good summertime.
Yeah, braids and a snapback. I don't think you can go wrong with that personally. I can't do either.
It's kind of a traditional tomboy sort of vibe,
Do you consider yourself a tomboy?
Oh, yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Is that has that always been the case, or did it? Okay.
When I moved out of my parents' house, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There are actually, my mother brought out a bunch of pictures for my birthday last week to show the family of glamour shots that I had taken of me when I was about 7. And I'm literally in like a fur stole on like a velvet lounge and the whole works. And it feels like I'm looking at a different person, to be honest. It's really weird.
Yeah, I mean, we all go through
yeah,
transformations. I feel like I just never really figured it out, and then I just kept wearing plain black Under Armour basketball shorts, and that became my thing. So I think my next vlog, I'm going to do like an outfit check. Some vloggers like fit check, and they're
outfit
like,
of the day.
yeah, it's just going to be the same shit I wear in every video. I think that would be. Sorry, I swore. I don't know if I can swear on here. My bad.
Out.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a fit check. I think it'd be funny when people see that I own literally the same pair of shorts, 5 different pairs.
Please do that.
Yeah. Could be interesting.
Like 5 different fit checks throughout the vlog, and it's literally the same outfit would be fantastic.
Mitch says, I feel like Jimmy had cornrows at some point in his early 20s. I think spiritually I had cornrows, but not in reality, unfortunately.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Hey, I'd wear it. I would wear it, Zen. And I know that I'm gonna, torque a lot of people off with that. That is one of my hot takes, I think, on this community. But
I don't know. So as someone who really enjoys Robin Hobb quite a bit, it's amazing that my community seems to be so split about Robin Hobb. In fact, I think now I have more people who dislike Robin Hobb than like Robin Hobb. And Ship of Magic seems to be one of the books that's the most like point of contention. So I don't think that you're necessarily alone in that. However, I think you might be one of the first people I've heard go through their dislikes of the book and do it in a compelling way.
Thank you.
A lot of times I don't find people's cases compelling, or I get bored at the sound of their voice. No, I'm just kidding. But I thought you did a nice job because you were trying to also acknowledge the craft side of things, which I've always been a big fan of in reviews or people's thoughts or whatever. But the truth of the matter is that most readers don't consider that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But that's why your review actually resonated with me. I was definitely going into it a little like, like this, like showing my bottom teeth, which is like not a good sign.
Yeah.
But then I felt compelled by your review, and I don't blame you for not liking it. And I even told you underneath your video that you should not continue.
I was like, oh, the Jimmy Nuts commented on my video.
Yeah, I know.
I've made it now.
I try to, I try to help
throw,
out where I can,
throw a coin to the smaller channels now and again. Yeah.
Well, in all seriousness though, with those kind of comments where it's like, hey, you shouldn't continue, I think sometimes it's passive aggressive.
Sure.
If you don't like this thing, I don't want to hear you talk anymore.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be very clear, and obviously you got the point, but I wanted to be clear that was not my intention. But it was like me knowing you and being like, yeah, not a good idea to continue. Not just because you're not going to like it, but I think that in general, it's just going to like ruin your day. So I'm glad that you heard me in the way that I wanted you to hear me.
Well, it was interesting because, on BookTube, we get recommendations all the time. We hear our friends' opinions about books all the time, about the things that we're reading all the time. Mm-hmm. And there were so many people who, it wasn't just one of those like, oh, you probably shouldn't read it then. It was like, I got messages and Voxer chats and everything that were genuinely concerned about me reading the rest of the trilogy. And I was like, okay, like this is one I might take a little bit more seriously because, everybody's really actually concerned about my experience going through especially the payoffs of the trilogy, I think is what I was kind of holding on to. And most of you guys were like, no. So yeah. No, yeah. So I trust you guys.
Yeah. If you want to continue with the fit stuff, go for it. But,
I just bought 20, man.
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of Robin Hobb. I don't think she's flawless by any means, and there
Sure.
are certain things that I dislike, especially with some of the later stuff. But like overall, like I had a great time with it. I just read the first book in Soldier Son, and I also thought
Okay.
I thought that was pretty good. I think it lacks some of the ties that I had to
Mm,
Farseer and live ships, but like it's Robin Hobb, and she looks at things in a very bleak manner, and I just happen to kind of vibe with that. I think.
yeah. Well, and that was the weird thing because, and one of the reasons why I was so hesitant on putting up the video, because like a lot of my favorite fantasy and just books in general are pretty like emotionally dark. So
Mhm.
it surprised me that I think it was just the specific types of emotionally dark that Robin Hobb specifically seems to be concerned with in a lot of her writing. But even, I mean, Live Ships was a completely different type of dark
Yeah.
than
Mhm.
the Farseer. Well, Farseer really isn't that dark in my opinion.
No, I mean, there's sad things and there's,
Right.
definitely a little bit of mustache twirling going on there, but it's not live ship goes through some pretty heinous things, especially in book 2 and 3 that are fairly rough. Um, so, people's mileage may vary. So,
um, Mitch, to answer this question, which I'm trying to decide if it's facetious or not.
it's a
No, I
R. Scott
empathize
Baker quote mixed
too
in.
much.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's an R. Scott Baker quote, like mixed in with a little bit of Erickson flavor there. I like that, Mitch. That's pretty good. Also, one of the best quotes ever. A book is not but a long consecutive surrender to the movements of another soul. Oh,
That's a good quote.
it's a banger. Yeah. R. Scott
That's from
Baker.
Baker. You tried to talk me into reading Baker last time we chatted.
Did I?
Yes. Which now knowing you were like, oh, you got to try Baker. And when I was rewatching the episode today, I was like, I bet maybe that has changed. Has that recommendation
maybe a
changed?
little bit.
Maybe a little
So here's
bit.
the thing. Here's the thing. I think you could like the first trilogy.
Okay.
There is definitely some stuff in there that is like very heinous. However, there's also some excellent battles that are told in a homerific way that are from bird's eye view that zooms out, which I really
Nice.
love.
Yep.
The writing is very biblical. If you've
Mm,
ever read the Book of Judges, which I'm sure you have, it reminds me a lot of the Book of Judges in many ways. It may be Ecclesiastes as well. So
okay.
like, it's
Real
just
pick me ups.
yeah. He has a gravitas, as my
Yeah.
friend
Yeah.
Amanda's always said. He has a gravitas to his writing. So I think from the craft perspective, you'd be like, whoa.
Yeah. That's
But
what I've heard.
maybe you should just read quotes. I don't know.
Do the Spark Notes version.
Yeah, maybe the spark
Yeah.
notes. The thing about Baker is at least in the sequels are a whole nother level of unhinged. And like
Right.
as hard as Prince of Nothing is to recommend to someone, I think that Aspect Emperor is harder to recommend than that. Even though I like the sequels more, but there's a darkness to it, and there are bad things that happen. But I think with the right framing of what's going on and what he was trying to accomplish, that I think he succeeded and failed at. To be honest, I think someone could get through it that maybe otherwise couldn't. But he
Sure.
also a lot of the stuff is dark in a manner where he like leaves out details, and you're like, oh, he lets you do the filling in.
Yeah.
And that can also be as demented as anything that someone could put on the page. Now there
For
are
sure.
graphic scenes as well, so like
Sure.
it's a tough one. I don't know. We'd have to like personally talk, and I'd probably have to spoil you on a few things and be like, "Are you okay with this?"
Well, that's what happened with Live Ships. Is I went to a couple of my friends that have read it, and I was like, okay, you guys, I need to know in this category of scenes what happens in the rest of the trilogy, because that's going to help me figure out if I'm actually willing to go through that or not.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I think it would be one of those conversations. Now, what I will say is, I think when people talk about how dark Second Apocalypse is, they're talking about Aspect Emperor. Aspect Emperor is like another level of depravity, and it's very Blood Meridian-esque. It's like Blood Meridian Dune had a baby, which is compelling. Right? Like just the sound of that, you're like, okay, that's interesting. Throw in some Mines of Moria in there as well, and then you get the
see that pulls me in more than anything else.
Oh, I don't know if you like these mines.
Probably not.
They're rough. They're rough, but there is a military campaign, and they're on the trail, and they're trying to do this thing. It's wild stuff. But I think a lot of the reputation actually comes from the sequels, not so much the
Sure.
first trilogy. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, and it's always hard to tell too with stuff that's super dark like that.
Mhm.
I feel like in some areas with certain series in our community that the darker the series, the more of a badge of honor it is to have read it. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, guess what I can handle, you know? And so I'm always hesitant with the really dark series, like, you know, and I like hearing recommendations from people who like you, who you acknowledge the darkness of it, but also you can talk about the other aspects, like the writing and the, you know, that it's not just dark just to be cool.
Yeah. I was very clear about this when I read through Berserk, because Berserk has a great audience that looks into the trauma of the events that happen in the manga, and a lot of people have actually found it very therapeutic, which is fascinating.
I've heard that. Yeah.
However, there's also a subset, and maybe they're a little bit younger, but it is about the shock value. It is about the spectacle. Right. And I've never been interested in the spectacle, but I've been interested in the approach, in the fallout of said thing. So for me, that's the difference. That's why some people will be like, oh, how can you like Game of Thrones, but you don't like insert some other dark series? And I'm like, well, it just simply didn't move me. Like, it has to move me in a way. So I don't know. It's tough. And there's a lot of people who watch my reviews and enjoy it, and they are there for the shock value. And, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with liking shock value either. I think like it has its place, and it's powerful whenever it's used properly, but still think there's context that needs to be around said thing. I mean, one of the biggest example of this is Blood Meridian. You know, you can tell what people get out of Blood Meridian by talking to them about it. And there's unfortunately just a lot of people who just like love watching people get scalped. And I'm like, that's not the part that I'm most interested in, actually.
Right.
Believe it or not. So yeah, and I fight that battle a lot with like the identity that I have, I think, on the internet. Because I've read a lot of stuff. I am a huge Baker fan. Like, I think he's one of the most talented guys ever. You know, but hey, this happens to Malazan too. Like, a lot of people look at Malazan this way. So like, I don't know. I struggle with that, and I try to always put out that road sign, like, you know, need not apply if you're only here for the moments, you know.
Right.
But I talked about this about like Game of Thrones yesterday on Bend the Knee, and I was talking about like why the series feels so epic to me, and like why I love Fire and Blood and things. And it's more about like the more intimate soul speaking stuff rather than like the big shock that comes, you know. So
Black Company is on my TBR. I'm supposed to be reading it with Matt on Books at some point, at least the first one. We'll see. I'm committing only to the first one until I see how I feel about it. But yeah, I just read The Hobbit this last week for the first time. And that was a really fun. I wasn't sure going into it how my experience was going to be, because everybody has this incredible nostalgic. I read it when I was a kid, or had it read to me as a kid. I didn't. And my gateway into Tolkien was the films, because they came out when I was 10 or 11.
Most people today, I think, is from the films. Yeah.
And so I was really nervous that magic wasn't going to be there. And it was, and I absolutely loved it. For the most part,
I love The Hobbit. I like The Hobbit more than Lord of the Rings. Yeah, Hobbit much more. A lot of
people have been saying that. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about The Hobbit is that it works perfectly as a book to read one chapter a night, because they're each little bedtime stories. So you can. I mean, it's literally how it's paced, is to read it to a child, and you can read one chapter a night and be like, wow. And then go to bed. And there's just something magical about it. And also, I said this in my review. You know, we make videos and we think they're going to do well. I remember when I did my Hobbit review, it was the first one I did in this house, and the audio was messed up, but I was like, man, this video is going to
Those are my favorite reviews. Are you kidding me?
It did horrible. I realized,
of course.
Nobody cares about a Hobbit review in 2022, I think is when I put it up. But one of the things I love is everyone can relate with Bilbo and just being annoyed with like family members and house guests.
He's such an everyman character.
Like, I really just don't want to socialize.
And quit
stealing my spoons, you pieces of garbage. Like, I don't know. There's something about Bilbo. I think he's the best character
he's
that
so
Tolkien
good.
ever wrote. He's better than any of the other characters, in my opinion. Like, and Frodo is not my dude. I like Sam and Bilbo far more.
Sam is an amazing character. Absolutely. Yeah. Frodo's a little bit too much of a Mary Sue.
Whiner. He's a whiner.
Yeah.
Oh, Sam, I can't come on. I can't stand Frodo. Oh my
god. Even in the movies, I was like, yeah, he was never a
great acting job.
Oh, 100%. Elijah Wood was the perfect casting choice for that.
But Sam is the man. Sam is great. The only thing I wish Sam would have done is went back to the Shire and overthrown like the structure that they have, instead of being like, oh, hey, master. Like, I'm like, could we get rid of that? That would have been neat. You know?
Yeah.
But that's also not the that's not the story Tolkien was talking about. So
Daniel gives it a 10% chance that
I think that if I had to put it on a fantasy, or a DraftKings parlay, I would not be betting that you're going to love it. I would bet against the house for sure.
Okay. I think this is a good point, Derry, because to be honest with you, I had a harder time reading Ship of Magic than I did any of the Malazan books, to be honest. And like going back and thinking through, like I'm in my reread right now, I'm in Dead House Gates, but like, I don't know what it is, but Hobb makes it feel darker. And it gets under your skin more, I think, from my experience anyways. And Malazan has some, Malazan's pretty dark.
Yeah, I would say so. There's a lot of stuff in Malazan that is very hard to get through. And some actually still has one or two scenes that I would consider was two of the hardest things I've ever had to read. But I've also read
Which books?
Dust of Dreams and House of Chains.
House of Chains. Yeah. I've read House of Chains. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole like first third of House of Chains is just a lot.
Bidethal is pretty disgusting,
Yeah.
Bidethal has to be one of the most despicable characters of all time.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I have to ask,
mm-hmm.
What is your stance on Tom Bombadil?
Tom Bombadil's awesome.
Okay.
Tom Bombadil is so awesome because Tom Bombadil could probably just go take the ring and cure it all, but he's tied up. He's got his bae and he's got to take care of her. I mean, he doesn't want to miss anything, and I respect that because he has the power to do all these things and he just chooses not to. So
he courteously abstains.
That's right, and choice is freedom and choice is living. So to me, having the ultimate choice of whether or not to destroy the ring. And then not doing it is such a Chad move. Love Tom Bombadil.
My husband is a big Tom Bombadil fan as well.
Yeah, I like Tom Bombadil. He'd be in the blunt rotation if I had one for fantasy characters for sure.
Nice. Derry, I just lost your comment. Hold on, I'm trying to find it. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Yes, agree, Derry. Also, this Duiker, I think, is, as I've gotten older and reflected on Dead House Gate specifically for 10 years, he is the character that I think has stuck with me the most from that book in terms of just his character arc and all of the things.
Yeah.
And I have the most to say about a different character in Dead House, but I think Duiker is awesome.
Yeah, I very much enjoy his arc.
Yeah, so the question now becomes: if Tom Bombadil is one member
of the Blunt Rotation,
or the others
on the spot, Jarl from the second Apocalypse sequels, without a doubt. The dude is I want to say a spoiler so bad, but I can't. I probably could. It's about his appearance. I won't, because it's one of the more shocking moments. I won't ruin it for people. But so Jarl from Aspect Emperor, Tom Bombadil, Krupp, and Bennebeck from Memory Sorrow Thorn, who is a troll and like one of my favorite characters in fantasy. That's just off the top of my head. I feel like Logan Ninefingers would be neat, but he'd probably end up ruining it by being like, my kids are dead.
By
and
existing.
Be like, dude,
yeah,
like relax, okay. Take a load off a little bit here. That's my gut reaction, though. I feel
Yeah.
like there has to be some other characters that I would put in there as
I
well.
mean, that's quite a lineup.
Yeah, it's gonna get weird, which is
Yeah.
what I like.
I only know 2 of those characters, and I'm already
Do you know
agreeing with you.
Bennebeck? Do you know
No.
Bennebeck?
I have not read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn yet.
I'm reading Witchwood Crown, the book 1 and the sequels.
Okay.
I'm so happy.
Well, because you've mentioned that that's one of your like favorite.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm doing a vlog of Witchwood Crown and You Like It Darker by Stephen King. Those are the 2 books I'm doing for my reading vlog. But like, and I'll say this in the vlog, but I'll say it here too. It's just like Ostenard is so distinct, and it is one of the few fantasy worlds that I can like think about and be transported to because of the details that are in the world. Obviously Westeros is one of those things for me. I would say Middle Earth is one of those things for me. Urwa, probably from Second Apocalypse, is also up there. Malazan, but like I know I'm listing a lot, and maybe I could talk about like even like possibly Greenbone Saga would be in there, even though like it's not my favorite series. Like I do know that it's very distinct, which is cool. But there's so many series I read or trilogies or whatever. And like the world is just, I read Justice of Kings, the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. That world doesn't add up to anything. It doesn't. It is never going to live in my mind. And I just think that Ostenard has to be in like rare air of like a top 3, top 2, maybe, location for me.
Yeah.
And the details of which Tad gives you are so Tolkien-esque, but better in my opinion. That's not a popular opinion, but for me it is, and the sequels he's adding to it. Like there's giants in the first 100 pages. I mean, I know that's simple, but like just like little thing, you're like, wait, there's more to discover in this world. And you get this feeling that you really are on like the brink of something new. And whew, I love Ostenard very, very much.
I'm very excited to get to Tad Williams at some point, because I remember when we talked in our Chatting with Us episode that like that was the one I came away from that discussion the most intrigued by, based on how you were talking about it, out of all the ones we had talked about.
Yeah, it absolutely has things about classical fantasy that have been in the genre for a long time. I just happen to think that Tad does it better than almost anybody else. And on top of that, it's like you don't have Stormlight or Name of the Wind or any of these things without Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And I'm not saying that you have to like it because of that, but it certainly means something. And when I read it, I got it. I was like, oh, I see. So for me, it is a methodical pace. It is a little bit slower. Simon is a boob. The main character is an absolute boob. Like he's just.
That seems to be a thing with a lot of fantasy.
That's fantasy. Yeah, Rand is also like that in Wheel of Time. Frodo would be. This is a trope.
Yep.
But the people that he fills in that cast are just something incredible to me. So, I love it.
Would you say it's rare for you to come away from a book or series where the main character is your favorite character?
Yeah. I mean, other than first person narration, chronicling tales type deals. Yeah, for sure. I find that many books that I read really don't have memorable characters. They can have good characters, but I'm talking about memorable characters. Yeah. But like, I've been in the Frost March with Bennebeck. Like, I have been there with him. I was there when Simon got his infamous nickname, and is Grimnor defending, against the Norns and things like that. Like, those are moments in time that in my
you just became Elrond for a second there.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man.
I've been there.
Kev gets it. Is Grimnor on top? Is Grimnor is amazing, dude. And how many Is Grimnors have we seen in fantasy? Big Viking-esque guy. We've seen a million of them.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I remember none. But I remember Is Grimnor, and that's because Tad writes him in a way that is, in my opinion, really amazing. So
yeah.
Anymore, I kind of hate getting really like fired up about things, because I feel like it's always the influx of I don't agree. Not that that's a problem, but like people being like, I read it, it was very disappointing, you were wrong. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like maybe I'm an idiot.
Yeah. So it's always hard to recommend things. I think especially so generalized, like when we do reviews and stuff like that, and we're trying to give out recommendations to people, it's almost easier once you've got kind of your inner circle of book friends to just, because you start to know each other's reading tastes so much that it's easier to say specifically for you, here's something that I think you're really going to like. And that was one of the questions that I had for you, actually, kind of along that line, was what is it? Because you do have kind of an eclectic taste when it comes to fantasy and the different things that you're kind of taste testing and trying different genre blendy things. And what is there something that kind of crosses over all of those genres that makes you go, these are elements in a book that I have to really love it?
Mortality.
Okay.
Yeah. Death. Yeah. That's the key component.
Okay.
I judge a lot for personal value of a book on how it deals with the question of mortality. I am not saying every book has to do that, but a book to resonate with me has to deal with mortality. This is something that, McCarthy was a big fan of, there's also other authors that felt this way. I believe that was also a Tolstoy thing. But to me, like, that is a question that we all have.
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
we all might have differing answers to that question, but we all have the question, and it shares common cause. I think that's also why romance really resonates with people, because I think everyone has a desire to love or to be loved by, whoever. So I think, that's why romance, goes a long way with people, and is why it's so popular. But for me, it's probably mortality.
Okay. It's impressive that you can boil it down to one word. That I'm very impressed by that, because I don't know that I could do that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with it. Not in a healthy ways. I lay down at night and I can't sleep because I'm just thinking horrible things about dying or someone I know dying, and I'm like, well, this is not normal. Like, this isn't normal. So whenever books give me kind of a reprieve or a different view of that, I think that it can help. And not every time does a book even like say something that I find to be true. It doesn't have to be something I agree with necessarily, but I just like to see how people handle that question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very fair. Well, and I mean, I would say, since you brought it up, like, that's something that I don't know if I would define it as mortality is the direction that I would go in, but when I'm reading, usually the books that resonate with me the hardest are characters that go through a lot of emotional suffering, like really deep emotional suffering, and have some kind of, like, they're still trying even from that place. Like, they're still searching for that kind of purpose, or
doing their best,
overcoming or fighting it, for a lot of the, I think, similar reasons where, like, I have dealt with a lot of, like, trust me, I also have stayed up late nights. I've had chronic nightmares. I've seen everyone I love die horrible deaths in my dreams since I was like 13. So I totally get it.
It's sick, right? It's awesome.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's definitely an experience.
Super cash money.
Yeah. But yeah. And I think that there's something really important about books where we can kind of let that breath out, the breath we didn't know we were holding. If you know what I mean?
Perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. Mitch.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nope.
So there's a difference between fetishizing emotional trauma and exploring it. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah, I was so nervous. I was like, I'm not going to lie. If you had come off of A Little Life and been like 5 stars all day, I'd have been like, I'm out, man.
Oh no.
I'm kidding.
No.
Maybe.
There are things in that book that are well done.
Yeah, I agree.
I do. So I had someone come up to me at jiu-jitsu. They figured I had a book channel, and they were like, so Little Life, do you still not want to talk about it? And I'm like, whatever you got to say. And he's like, I love that book. I said, oh, okay. And he explained his thing. And I said, there are things about it that I really did enjoy. And I actually think that she's a fabulous writer. I think in fact, I think that's, people say they don't care about writing. I think the way that book is written pushes it further than it would have been otherwise if she wasn't so talented. I think she's very talented. But at some point, I fell off the wagon. And I think there's a whole lot in that book that's done fairly, poorly. I just don't think it's very good. But also on top, I don't think that I think desensitization can actually be a like mechanism you can use in your books. I think it can drive a point home. I actually think it can be intentional. I don't think it was her intention. And then I can't lie, hearing her talk, I never want to read anything from her again. I don't I don't read things from people I exclusively agree with.
Right.
But for her, I mean, she reveled in her ignorance, and I just thought that was kind of trash, to be honest. So yeah. And I think it was somebody left a comment. It might have been Ryan who left this comment on my channel, who's part of my community, and said Toni Morrison said, we should come away feeling like actionable about a character that goes through turmoil, because Toni Morrison's written a lot of stuff. I've not read her, by the way, but I know that she's written stuff that's considered extremely difficult to get through.
Yeah.
But what she never wanted was someone to pity her character.
Right.
And she said she came away from Little Life pitying, and she said in that regard it's a failure. Yeah. And I kind of wanted to buck back against that when I read it, because I read that comment, that quote, before I read it. And I said, I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to try to look at it from the other side. And I hate to admit it, but I think Toni Morrison absolutely nailed it. I think that that's the problem with that book.
Yeah, I think, I definitely think that's a good point. That's one of the only books that I've talked very little on my channel about when it comes to like really strong opinions.
Yeah.
I've mentioned a couple of times that I've read it, but it makes me so angry to even talk about it that I typically just...
Yeah, in some ways, though, like, I'm glad it exists. I know that sounds weird.
No, I get that.
But like, for a book to give me that much conflict within myself, I don't know. Maybe that.
Well, and being able to recognize I was so angry. It was kind of, in a very different realm. Yeah. Ship of Magic really gave me more to reflect about. Now, I will say a lot more positive things about that book than Little Life, but I think sometimes, I'm able to articulate what it was about those two books that I really struggled with or didn't like, and why. And I think that's good. I think that's a skill set that we should have, especially if we're content creators that are literally recommending books to people. Like, I do think that's a valuable skill set.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I do have some sort of like appreciation for books, even whenever I angrily disagree with them, or it makes me feel like this, visceral like hate. At least it did something, I think she had something to say. I don't know if I care for it, but she had something to say, and she wrote it.
Said it. She said a lot of it.
Yeah, and then we could go into a whole thing of whether we think that is reaffirming certain stereotypes and harmful, I would say degenerative views of therapy, or the fact that apparently no males can just have healthy bonds between each other. There's a lot there.
It's not a thing.
Yeah, in fact, I think that I'm surprised to not see as many males who read the book kind of buck back against her view of like male friendship. I think is fairly terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty toxic.
Yeah, I think it's toxic, and I also think she perverts a lot of things. Just platonic relationship between say like a gay man and a straight man, and that I just found unnecessary.
Yeah.
And maybe reaffirms a lot of like harmful views of that thing. So I don't want to get into all of it, but like as you could tell, like I thought about the book a lot.
Yeah.
So for that, I'm grateful, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, turning that to a book that I was just about to start when we talked last time. And we talked about being a character-focused reader and how many people say that. And the test book is LPQ, or the test series is LPQ. If you say, I'm a character-focused reader, read LPQ and get back to me on that. And having now read the entire quartet, could not agree more with you. And I'm very proud to come back and report that I have proven my statement of being a character-focused reader, because I loved the heck out of LPQ, which really surprised me, actually, because it's written in a way that I think even 5 to 6 years ago, I wouldn't have been ready for.
Yeah.
I probably would have DNF'd it.
There's a lot about LPQ that has like two angles to it, and I think some of the more philosophical things that he goes into in that series are very, very interesting that pertain. Like, I think it's actually a good example of like fantasy being able to commentate on our world without being upfront about it or even really showing its face, and not a deceptive way either, but it more like through points of humanity, like questions that we ask ourselves, but also just a lot of different characters, a lot of different personalities, and he melds them all very, very well. It's not the most enthralling gas, plot of all time, pedal to the metal, but for me, I found it really enriching.
There's no gas. Like, you have to get out behind the car and push.
Yeah,
but you're okay with it. Yeah. I was gonna say to Derry's comment, totally agree with that personally. And I mean, anybody who's seen or read the scene between Boromir and Aragorn at the end, like, there's such a powerful, that's still one of the moments that stands out the most to me in the entire trilogy. And I think, also Legolas and Gimli are just fantastic. I love them.
One of the very few like enemies to friends or enemies to lovers tropes I can stand is actually that one. One of the very few.
That's fair. Yeah, that is
Brienne
fair.
and Jaime Lannister is another one, but for the most part, every time I see it in a book, I'm like, I don't know. There's something about
I think it's overdone so often. Like, where it just feels like it's so heavy-handed, where you almost know at the beginning. Yeah. You're just like, okay,
it's
here
all
we go.
about the bickering to me.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, Jen Williams wrote what is that trilogy called? Ninth Reign.
I'm trying to remember the name of the full
called?
Trilogy.
Somebody
in the comments.
Somebody put it in the chat. So the thing about that is, I actually think that series is rather good. I need to quit saying rather. I've been saying rather a lot tonight. Driving myself insane. But I think that the book is actually good, but it had an enemies to kind of like friends or lovers type deal going on. And I really just could not stand the way they bickered. On the flip side of that, Jaime Lannister and Brienne's bickering, I enjoyed it. I don't know. Maybe I'm a hypocrite for that, but I just enjoyed the way that they went back.
Possibly slightly biased also.
Yeah. But that bias had to form some way, right?
It's true. It's true.
Winnowing Flame trilogy.
That's right. Yeah. Also, I apologize, Sebastian. Long Price Quartet. Derry put it in the comments, but
by Daniel Abraham.
Yes. That was the series that, like, I literally got to the last page of Price of Spring. I put down the book. I went online and I ordered everything else he'd written. Like,
I haven't read anything from him I didn't like yet.
Yeah, I'm excited. I have the Dagger and the Coins,
one of the most underrated fantasy series, I think.
Nice.
Doesn't get enough recognition. I haven't read Kithmar. I'm excited to read it and love it because everyone I know says it sucks and it's boring other than Alan, so I'm sure I'll like it.
Yeah.
And then the first two Expanse books, obviously co-published or co-written with Ty Franck, I think are tremendous. That's another series that gets like, I feel like the Expanse is really popular, like outside of like the niche of booktube.
Yeah.
Like if you go out in the real world, like it's so popular.
Yeah.
But I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but the general consensus I always see around is like, it's mid, it's fine, 7 out of 10. But the first two books,
you 5-starred those.
I loved them. And my friend Garrick is reading through book 2 right now. And when he gets into book 3, I'm going to buddy read the third one with him. And I might just go all the way through because I love the television show.
Nice.
So, yeah. And Abraham, there you go. I mean, he's just a dude that I happen to like pretty much everything he's done so far.
Yeah. Chris is liking Kithmar.
Yeah, and Kyle, you're right. Expanse is probably within the booktube sphere. I'm specifically talking about our like sliver. I see all my friends that are in the sci-fi. I just feel like they all kind of like on Expanse. It's fine, but you're an idiot if you love it. Kind of vibe.
So what is with that? Like, what is a series or book that everyone has read? You feel like everyone else has read that you still haven't read yet, that you maybe still have on your TBR? Are there any? Because you've read everything at this point.
No. The sequels for Red Rising. That is one. The release of what was the last one called?
Lightbringer.
Lightbringer was one of the biggest moments in my Patreon Discord, and I was not a part of it, and it felt very strange.
Yeah.
So I think that those are probably it, just the sequels to
Yeah.
them because everyone loves them. I also have never finished Harry Potter and never will.
Okay.
So that's another one that I always kind of feel left out on. But I don't necessarily care. What's another one? Let me think. I know there's at least one more. I mean, Wheel of Time. Like I didn't finish Wheel of Time. Again, probably never will.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, yeah, the Red Rising sequels are probably number one. Yeah.
Yeah. I read Iron Gold last month. I'm reading Dark Age finally this next month. And then
I hear it's dark.
That's what I hear. And it's funny because after I did my review of Ship of Magic, everybody was like, oh no. And I was like, yeah, but Pierce Brown and Robin Hobb do not write the same style of emotional destruction. So I'm really not as worried about it. I'm really not that worried about it.
Yeah.
But Kyle wants to know why you didn't finish Harry Potter.
I think I was like 13 or 12 or 13 when the fourth book came out, and I got about 250 pages into the Quidditch thing, and I was like, oh, I don't like this at all anymore. This sucks. And then I read the Halo books instead, like a real teenager.
Sure.
And I really liked all those First Reach and all those Halo books. But it was competing with Xbox Live. Like, good luck. I don't know how you compete with that. But I recently went back and started to read the first book again, and I was like, man, I do not like this writing at all. I don't. And honestly, I just don't. I don't know. Doesn't pull me in any way, shape, or form.
It was interesting because I have not read the series yet either. I read the first one last year. And I don't know this. And if there are Harry Potter nerds in the chat who know the answer to this, I would be willing to bet money that she's a discovery writer, because reading the first book after knowing the story through the films and people talking, I mean, they came out when we were, young. So they're pretty entrenched in like my whole experience of other people growing up around me. And I was like, there's some things in here you had no idea like where this was going, did you? Which is cool, but like
I couldn't imagine not being a discovery writer personally.
Yeah.
That to me is the magic. It's the same thing with wrestling. It was like some guys planned out every little thing. Like Randy Savage, actually, the Macho Man, he was one of those guys. He would plan out literally how you kicked out of his pins. Like that's how crazy possessive he was. For me, the magic was always in like the improv and finding the moments. And I think writing would be very similar. In fact, anything I've ever sat down and actually made an outline for never gets anywhere because I'm bored by it.
Yeah. Well, you've already written it in a way.
Yeah, I know the answers.
Yeah. Well, and like to your point, Derry, why is this not showing up? There we go. I have the ending of my trilogy in my head, but I'm still discovery writing because I feel like when you say discovery writer, it's more like you might have kind of like that skeleton in your head of like, here's the important bits that I really want to get to, but knowing how exactly you're going to get there or who exactly these characters are on the grander scale isn't quite there yet.
If you need an example of this, George R. Martin supposedly has written the last paragraph of the series. That's supposedly a thing. He's written like the last page or last paragraph, and only Daniel Abraham knows it. And he told him whenever he was doing the graphic novels. So, I mean, George is the biggest discovery writer we know. He created the term gardener, I think. So, yeah.
I actually have, since we broached the topic of Germ, I actually have some speed questions for Game of Thrones for you.
I would love that.
Okay. And it's mostly like character focused, but we've discovered we roll that way. So, what is a character in the series? You cannot use Bobby Baratheon for any of these, by the way.
Sorry, bud.
Right? Don't tell him. Character in the series that doesn't get enough love.
Oh, there's a lot.
You gotta pick one.
Donald Noy.
I mean, that kind of proves your point, I guess.
Yeah, I would say
like who?
Donald Noy. He is pretty much. In fact, I don't think he's in the show at all. My memory of the show is actually worse than it is of the books. But Donald Noy has a prominent role to play in everything that happens at the wall.
Okay.
And is a master armorer and doesn't get any kind of credit. Like Donald Noy is a staple of the Night's Watch. Like you don't have the Night's Watch in the books without Donald Noy, and I think that he's slightly forgotten about. And by slightly, I mean completely.
I mean, in my defense, it's been over 10 years since I read them, so I'm sorry, don't know.
Yeah, he's not favored, I don't think. By
the name rings a bell, but I literally don't remember him at all.
Here, I'll read his wiki of Ice and Fire.
Okay.
Donald has a big belly and a pinned up sleeve. His jaws bristle with black stubble. He is muscular and strong, even though one hand is missing. And he is an armorer, a smith, a steward of the Night's Watch. He used to be a smith for House Baratheon of Storm's End. I believe he's the person who forged Robert's Warhammer.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's correct. I know Kyle's in the chat. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. But like the dude is like kind of
important. Yeah.
Yes. And is huge when it comes to holding the wall. He is
Sure.
He's massive. He also ends up he has a scene where he ends up helping Jon with one arm, which I just think is like super dope. Like anytime someone goes out of their way and like they're like less abled and they help some, I don't know. He's just a great character. I love all the wall stuff in the books too. It's probably my favorite part of like the series and the locations.
Yeah.
So Donald Noy, pretty awesome.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I'm still trying to decide. I will eventually probably reread them.
I mean,
probably.
I support that.
I figured you would. Okay. Character that gets way too much love.
Whew, way too much love? Ooh, okay. Hold on.
Overrated character.
Overrated. Man, I'm gonna say this, but I don't mean it in such a horrible way. Okay, but it's Jon Snow. Jon Snow's probably the most overrated. I hate to say that, but
that's fair.
It's true. I love Jon Snow. He's one of my favorite fantasy characters.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like he's a bit overrated personally. No, I think Bran's underrated at this point. People have completely lost their minds when it comes to Bran, as if his parts in A Dance with Dragons aren't absolute gasoline and fueling all of the lore and history in the series. Without Bran, it isn't a fantasy series anymore in some respects. So to me, Bran is super duper important. Derry said Bloody Stannis. That was actually gonna possibly be my second one, but I love Stannis the Manus, and he is the one true king. So pay your respects, bend the knee.
I'm not a fan. Stannis drove me. I was like, every time he was on page or on screen, I was just like, okay.
Tyrion is the only right answer. Anitha. Tyrion is my favorite character of all time, probably.
He's a brilliantly written character, honestly.
Yeah, he's probably my favorite.
Okay, best battle.
Battle of Blackwater. It's my favorite battle in all of fantasy. I say that, but I do know there's some battles in Second Apocalypse that could probably rival it.
Okay.
But the Battle of Blackwater Bay is such a monumentous event, not just for the book's climax, but for every single person that is in that battle or associated with that battle comes out of it a completely different person and sets them on trajectories that you would have never been able to predict prior to the Battle of Blackwater. Perfect example would be Tyrion ending up becoming a war hero. Obviously, that is not exactly how it ends up playing out for him because he goes into a coma and wakes up like a month later. But also Clegane, Sandor Clegane.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had told you in book one that he'd be this sympathetic guy who has PTSD and is on the road and ends up running to it, just insane what comes out of that. And then it also sets Sansa on a very different track of being locked into a room with Illian Payne and Cersei. It changes how Cersei views the world. She thought they were untouchable, and then all of a sudden she's thinking about having Payne chop her and her children's heads off, which is or poison or whatever it might have been. So there's so much to that battle. And there's a lot of fireworks. The chain is sick, all that stuff. But more so is the actual pathways it puts the characters on. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
I mean, literally,
like,
think about
yeah,
Davos.
but
It literally creates the character of Davos.
Yeah.
Davos has a backstory and everything, but Davos opens up the next book after the Battle of Blackwater Bay on an island and has a religious experience that we still to this day don't understand whether or not it was real or if it
Right.
was a hallucination. And the funny thing about Davos is almost every single time a big thing happens with Davos, it is centered around him talking about the mother, the God figure. And
Mhm.
there is religious undertones to Davos and possible like God implications like all over his chapters,
Yeah.
and it all starts at Blackwater Bay.
Yeah.
So good. So
Yeah.
so good.
Davos is a good character too. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
Best power play moment.
Oh God.
There's a few.
I'm forgetting the name now. Let me see. I think Tyrion slapping around Joffrey's up there. Also Ed fetch me a block is up there. Jon Snow at the wall. Those would probably be the best. Now from the show, I can tell you something from the show that's not in the books that is the best power play of all time. And that is power is power. Whenever Littlefinger tries to like one up Cersei.
Yes.
And he's like talking about what power is. And then she's like, guards, grab him, cut his head off. And he's like, oh, and she's like, power is power.
Power is power. Yeah.
Like, okay. Oh my goodness. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yep.
Yeah. And Daenerys also speaking in knowing Valerian and then exposing it and then getting the army, Unsullied army is one of the most epic moments. Ugh,
yep.
Good stuff.
I'm a big fan of Lady Olenna.
No one writes spicier grandmas than George.
I know. She's awesome.
Yeah, she's the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best character arc so far. Because obviously we don't have the ending.
Man. Tyrion's probably it because he becomes the villain, which is interesting. Obviously Jaime is amazing, but I think we need the full thing for that. So I would probably go with this. Also, the problem with Jaime, it's not a problem. I shouldn't say it's a problem. It's not a problem, but like a large amount of Jaime's arc is tied into the theme of perception. And what people perceive you as is actually what is reality, right? And the interesting thing about that theme, the reason why it's interesting is because he is coupled with Brienne, who, for all intents and purposes, has the exact same title as him from people's perception, which is Kingslayer. Because people forget, but the canon in everyone's head in Westeros, not the reader, in world, is that Brienne slayed her king Renly, right? She did not do it. But yet, even though she did not do it, she doesn't want to be called Kingslayer. She calls Jaime Kingslayer and projects that onto him. And he clearly did the right thing, by the way.
Right.
And even Honorable Ned Stark can't see that and has to, stand behind morals and reasoning, all these things. So Jaime's like the theme of perception for him, and identity is also a major thing in A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's way more enriched by being paired with Brienne, which is why it's so genius that they end up together and why George is one of the best. But with Tyrion, a lot of it is an internal struggle of understanding that he is someone who is disadvantaged just because of how he looks and how he was born, but also privileged because of who he is and how he was born. So like that is a whole conundrum inside of himself that he can't seem to actually resolve within himself. And there are external factors that affect this, but primarily it is happening within Tyrion himself, which fuels his alcoholism and abusive tendencies in A Dance with Dragons and his just any grasp at attempt at power post A Storm of Swords.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Woo, I love this series, dude.
I couldn't. That's one of the reasons why I always love bringing up favorite series on these chats, because it is so much fun to watch people literally like lean forward and light up.
Yeah. I mean, someone asked me how many times I read A Song of Ice and Fire. I think it's 7. It's either 7 or 8.
Some
of it just don't
just
this
plug
you'll
your
be
ears.
fine. Yeah, just plug your ears, move on. It'll be okay.
I kind of definitely agree with that, to be honest.
All right, so here's the problem with Ned. Okay, here's the problem with Ned. I'm not gonna spoil anything.
He's my husband's favorite. Like he loves Ned.
First, we feel empathy for Ned, and then someone will reread the series and say Ned is the dumbest character that's ever been written. I think that is a bit that's
Sure.
not charitable.
Yeah.
I think that he is a consistent character.
Very.
And if you think there aren't people who think like Ned Stark in the world, they exist
100%.
everywhere.
Yeah.
They're it's very much a real person. So I think he DK said I was joking, waiting for the last book. My bad.
I was
You.
so sorry.
Yeah, my bad. But I don't think Ned's as dumb as people make it out to be. I think he does have some errors, but he's a good man mostly.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are so many times where you just are like, no, why? But yeah, I do agree with you that like saying that he's the dumbest character ever isn't. He's literally so displaced when he's called back. Like, what is he supposed to do? He's like, oh, by the way, you're now like supposed to help make decisions.
Well, geographically, it also makes a lot of sense because a place like the North, where it takes so much more to survive than the warm South, would be a totally different vibe, and it changes people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just like let's take Mark, slowly red from Alaska, and then just go throw him into Miami, and have him run for office. Like it would be a very weird thing, right? Very.
I live in Minnesota, which is
we'll take
exactly
you.
The same, but
we'll take you and throw you into Mobile.
I would
Alabama.
melt. I would melt in 5 minutes.
Yes. And this is also, I think what George probably played with is the idea of like the homegrown senator being sent to DC. I'm going to go to DC and clean them out. Exactly. Yeah. And then they go and they get big donor money and they're screwed over, or it's political suicide. Right. So
yeah,
I think that's also a play of it. I mean, politics. So.
Yeah. Best friendship.
It's probably Sam and John. Sam and John. I'm shooting from the hip there because I'm not thinking about it too much, but I would say Sam and John.
Yeah, love Sam. Why is it always the best friend Sam is always like this?
That was intentional.
Yeah, I figured.
You want me to really blow your mind? You want to know who the ultimate bad is in A Song of Ice and Fire? Euron. So Euron has one eye, and his banner. House banner is of his one eye. Euron sounds a lot like Sauron, does it not?
I'm kidding.
Euron, Sauron, one eye, ultimate evil.
I don't see it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Strange.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Really.
Speaking of which, this is a side note because when we talked last time, you picked House Greyjoy for me. And I would like to know if that opinion has changed because I don't really gravitate to House Greyjoy at all. So I like Theon's arc for reasons, but other than that, I don't get it.
Nah, I'm sticking with it. You're Greyjoy. You're Greyjoy. What his dad may never die. Yeah, nope.
Okay.
I'm sticking with it. There's like a metalness to them, and I associate that with you.
Okay. I can see that.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should pick like a more militaristic family. I don't know who that would be.
I could totally see like just pulling up the drawbridges and be like, "Now you guys fight it out, and I'm just gonna stay over here."
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily know if you'd want to like essentially be a Viking. I don't know if that's really your vibe, but that's kind of what they do, isn't it? They come and plunder and pillage and leave.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know if you fit into any of the boxes.
It's like me in a bookstore.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know if you fit in any of the boxes, but I feel like if you had to, that's what I would pick.
Okay. I mean, you are way more of a Game of Thrones fan than I am, so I will just...
Yara is a freaking bat. Yeah, I mean
I did think of her as soon as I was like, I don't know, and then I was like, but also,
yeah, the King's Moot and all that good stuff. There's a lot of Greyjoy stuff that is also kind of, in my opinion, a little bit underrated. But I think they're probably one of the least favorite houses.
I don't dislike them necessarily. I just wasn't ever like, oh yeah, I could be a Greyjoy, which is.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really wants to be a Greyjoy.
I don't even know that the Greyjoys.
You can perceive that as an insult, but I didn't mean it that way. I'm
No.
sorry.
No. I'm way harder to offend than that, Jimmy.
Okay, good.
Worst villain.
Worst is in like the most dastardly?
Take it however you want.
Or like worst is in like they're not good, like he shouldn't have written them.
No, not like he did a poor job writing them, but
okay,
just
so like the most hateable.
Like I take anybody but this person.
Joffrey.
Okay.
Joffrey. I actively was cheering for a kid's death. I mean that's not like that's absurd of me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is also kind of the fun of fiction. By the way, is like to get to do those things that we know are like awful, but like be able to
the intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, there are some people who read that and be like, "That is terrible. How could George do that? Get you to root against a child." But like to me, like that's part of the fun of fiction. So yeah, it's definitely Joffrey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you're in a duel, and you can pick one character to fight alongside you.
Arthur Dayne.
Okay.
No. I retract it. So, my bad. I'm wrong. Whew. Almost made a mistake. Barristan Selmy. By God.
Yeah.
Barristan the Bold. Okay. It's got to be Barristan. Barristan is up, that would also be another one I would mark for like one of my favorite characters that doesn't get enough respect. I remember doing the live chats with Lena and Alex when I did the reread, and I went on this big thing about how important Barristan is in the history of Westeros and Regency. And she was like, "Who cares about Barristan Selmy?" And I was like, "Who cares about Barristan Selmy?" And I was like, "What are we even doing here? If you don't care about Barristan Selmy," I lost my mind. Yeah, Barristan, melted down and added to the pile, boy. Oh God.
That's fair.
Drogon, fair. Yeah, the nuclear bomb would be good.
Yeah, that is fair. Okay. One of the characters in Game of Thrones has to write your biography. Who's doing it?
Has to write it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably Tyrion, because he's the most well-read of the characters. Sure. At least, I mean, obviously the Maesters, like Maester Lewin would probably be pretty great at that as well. But like either Samwell, you know what? I'd probably do Samwell because
that would be my choice.
He would think I'm so sick. Like,
right?
Dude, you talk to girls, that's crazy. That's insane, dude.
Can I just say, Sam and Gilly are like one of my favorite things about the entire.
Yeah.
I love them.
Sam.
I love them so much.
Yeah. Sam's the best.
Yeah. So those were all of my speed questions, but I had to know, as a Game of Thrones mega fan, what you would answer.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like I mentioned before, love seeing people light up, and immediately you were like, "Oh, all right, I got things to say."
Oh yeah. I mean, I think about this series on a daily basis, and I don't talk about it as much on the channel as one would think, and I think that's because like a lot of what we do on BookTube and my channel is like, did we like it or not? And I am so sure that I like it. Like I've solved that question for myself.
Right.
I'm way more interested in discussing like the roles of things and maybe the depth of it, rather than like, oh, did you know he split books 4 and 5 and like book 4 sucks? And like I don't find any of that interesting to talk about. So I light up anytime I get a chance to talk about it in a different type of context, like, a little deeper.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way with Red Rising to some extent, because like I've thought about doing a why you should read Red Rising so many times, and I just don't like.
Well, here's a nice thing.
I would rather do like character deep dives and like look at themes, and that sounds like way more fun to me at this point.
Yeah, and the other thing is like you don't have to feel like you bear a responsibility to get people to try these things because Red Rising and A Song of Ice and Fire are obviously popular.
They're
so,
okay.
Like, you're not
doing okay.
I mean, sure, you will convince somebody, probably.
Oh yeah,
but like it's doing fine by itself,
right?
So it takes off a little bit of the pressure. Whereas, like I look at like Tad Williams, and Tad has millions of books sold, clearly. But you had a discussion with Joanna about epic fantasy, like where to go, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
that spawned, you guys had a discussion that spawned about
It's
75
been an
other
interesting
co-opted
couple of
videos.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And all I can sit there is just stare at this release schedule, and I'm looking and I'm like, okay, Tad Williams is about to put out the final book into a 4-book series that is a sequel to a 3-book series of an ongoing series that's been going for 40 years. And not a single person I know gives 2 shits. And I'm like, you can't be curious about why epic fantasies get published if you're not going to read it. And now I'm not saying Tad Williams is the only person doing it, but I'm just saying it's a pretty solid example of epic fantasy. I do feel some sort of desire to get more people to read it because I do like epic fantasy, and I do think it's getting published less. I don't think it's dead. I don't believe it's dead at all.
That is one thing I would like to make a comment about, is that it was mentioned that the discussion we were having was about if epic fantasy was dead. That is not. That was not the conversation. Yeah, because obviously it's not.
No, it was co-opted. So just like
yes. Yes. But one of the things that I find really interesting, because obviously epic fantasy is something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. And like, it's the new, like, there's not as much focus on it new coming out. And I do think that you have a good point with, Janny's coming out with her final book in her series, and like Tad Williams and a lot of these authors who've been writing epic for so long are struggling to maybe find a footing in the current mainstream fantasy climate. Yeah. And that's really, and I think epic fantasy in general is having a little bit of a harder time in the wider mainstream fantasy, just pick up a book at Barnes and Noble people.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that, and this is, I am always talking about Tad Williams, and people say, oh guys, like I would love to, but I got to remember I saw on Thorn, and To Green Inch Tower is one of the longest books ever written. And I'm like, I know, like that is epic fantasy a lot of the times. Right. Yeah. Or with Janny Warts, we're talking about 11 books or 10 books to read this 11 one that just came out.
Yeah. It's a commitment.
It is a commitment.
Yep.
It's not always easy. And, no series is perfect. There's going to be lulls for readers at points. So there's that, it doesn't shock me.
No.
However, at least on the side of Tad Williams, I would really like to put more people in the driver's seat of, what I think is a Cadillac of the genre. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not do it? And he's only gotten better with time. I'm telling you, I'm 150 pages or 160 pages into Witchwood Crown, and it is amazing. I think it's already going to be better than Dragonbone Chair, which is high praise for me because I love Dragonbone Chair.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And also, like, to the point of like, new deals of people being signed aren't getting epic fantasy deals, and I think that's a good thing. I don't know if your first book, I'm not saying it can't be, okay?
I'm not saying necessarily new authors who are like, it's the first thing they're publishing.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm more so referencing other people's videos and such.
Yeah.
But I'm like, maybe your debut should be a 1,000-page chunk or epic. Now, I know everyone's got their series, but even Tad Williams had to start out writing a cat series. George R. Martin wrote many years before he wrote Game of Thrones, which I wish more people would read his other works as well. There's nothing wrong with working up to something. Even Brandon Sanderson has worked up to Stormlight Archive. And by the way, book 5 of that's coming out this year and will outsell everything that isn't named Sarah J. Maas in the fantasy genre this year. So I think maybe publishers are being a little bit more selective.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Like I think it was Rogue said, genre trends tend to be cyclical. But I saw, and not talking about you, but I saw people talking about, oh, this is awful, this and that. And then we haven't, no peeps from many people about, things like Tad's 4th book coming out. And I'm like, well, if you want to see more of it, you got to support it. That's how this works. I don't want to buy book 1 because the series is not finished. I understand that, especially from a fiscal perspective.
Yep.
But if you don't buy book 1, there's never going to be a book 2.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I've kind of gone back, especially the first few months of this year, going back and finding classic and pre-2000s fantasy written by female authors.
Mm-hmm.
And I found Juliette Marillier that way, and her Daughter of her Seven Waters series I can't wait to finish that series. It's incredible. And she said in the interview that I had with her, she's a delight, by the way, that Blackthorn and Grimm was actually, in her opinion, her better series even than Seven Waters, which is one of the more well-known ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I bought everything this woman has written after one book, and I cannot wait to read more of it. And it's not epic per se, but like, it's sometimes removing yourself from, I think, the trends of what everyone is talking about.
That's 100% correct.
And moving to a different lane for a while.
There is so much out there, epic fantasy wise. There's the Emma Catherys, the Catherine Kerrs, Julian Mays, the bazillion other ones out there.
Yep.
That people haven't read. I think I'm trying to remember the one I have downstairs from a Sean something, but it's called like The One Kingdom. It's a whole epic fantasy series that's out there. And I'm not saying all of it's going to be great, but like there's plenty to try while we wait for the next Stormlight, or we wait for the next whatever it might be. So, you know, well, and also trends can go, you know, if old things become popular again, who knows?
I just bought my first Carol Berg book. Recently I picked up the Tawny Man trilogy because I'm trying to not OCD about like finishing Live Ship first and then going, I'm like, nope, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. But it's also, I think sometimes getting frustrated with where is the support for these epic fantasy series that we love so much. And also recognizing as soon as we step a toe out of our very obsessed nerdy fantasy booktube bubble, like the average person who's like, I want to read a fantasy book is not going to go into Barnes and Noble and look at Malazan or whatever and be like, let's go. Like, that's just not realistic.
No,
either.
It's not at all.
And that's why you see so many exceptionally popular, what I would consider popcorn reads, which there's nothing wrong with, by the way. But also, that's why there's a kiosk of ACOTAR and not Malazan, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. Definitely. And what's digestible, what's in the zeitgeist, like what people want to experience. And culturally, it matters quite a bit of what people are going through. You know, there's a reason why a lot of people like to crap on like YA dystopian fiction, but no one, you know, got to think about why. Now,
I like dystopian fiction.
By the way, part of the reason is because Hunger Games sold a lot. So let's not kid ourselves. The publishers are going to take whatever it is, dumb it down, and try to push it into your face. Yes. Yeah. But there's a reason why, in general, like certain things catch on. So
I agree, Kev, but most people won't.
I did watch a doctor today. I was watching his thing. It's completely unrelated. He has like 60,000 subs on YouTube, and he had a bookshelf in the background. And that dude had Malazan all 10, and they were red. And I was like, oh, that's my dude right there. So nice. I'm about to drop a comment.
Zoom in.
Yeah. Be like, bro, I don't even care what you're talking about right now. This is sick.
You should. You should. Absolutely should.
I don't need any more friends, you know?
Yeah. Capped out.
Social bandwidth is at an all-time maximum, you know?
I have heard of Tanith Leaf. Have not
Sean Russell, The One Kingdom is absolutely solid. I would Sarah, that is the one I was talking about. It sounds awesome. I have the first two, I think. Is there two? I don't know how many there are, but I bought that used.
Nice. This is the Carol Berg that I bought. It was recommended to me by Janny Wirtz and my good friend Casey over at Bookishly Bookish, who has read a lot more pre-2000s fantasy.
Song of the Beast?
Song of the Beast. Yep. Do you want me to just read the little blurb at the back?
Brutal imprisonment has broken Aidan McAllister, once the most famous musician of his generation, celebrated as a man beloved of the gods. His voice is now silent, his hands ruined, his music that offered beauty and hope to war-torn Illyria destroyed. Even the god who nurtured his talent since boyhood has abandoned him. No one ever told him his crime. To discover the truth, he must risk his hard-fought freedom to unlock the mind of his god and the heart of his enemy. I'm in.
Right? It's like a destroyed bard character. Come on.
Carol's cooking.
Yeah. Casey's in the chat. She's like, she had recommended it to me, and then I was chatting with Janny Wirtz, and I was like, what would you recommend? She's like, Song of the Beach. I was like, all right. I guess.
This might be the move. Also, her covers are fire.
Right?
Flesh and Spirit.
Let me know
cover
if you want to read it at some point, because we could definitely. It's not that long. Look.
Because these Osenard books aren't short, and they're taking up quite a bit of my time.
Yeah, but that's not bad.
That's not bad at all.
No, this copy is like 370 pages. I mean, Jimmy, look, the other book we had talked about buddy reading. Do you remember that?
I don't. What is it?
Was War and Peace. So I feel like in my like, here's books I'd like to get to in 2024, and I legit put War and Peace on there, and now I went back and watched that, and I was like, no.
Yo, I started Anna Karenina 2 years ago, and I still haven't finished it, so, and I like it, so I need to finish that first. I think
I have Deed of Paxenarian on my shelf.
Good,
very
good
excited,
book.
very
good
excited to
book.
read it. Yeah,
I imagine you would enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I think Murphy read it recently. I don't know if she liked it or not.
I don't. Murphy and I don't always.
I would say knowing Murphy, knowing Murphy, a great friend of mine now.
Yeah,
she probably didn't like it because I liked it.
Yeah.
That's usually how this works.
I have a Voxer chat with her and Nico and Andrew Wizard, and Nico and I are kind of the tired parents of that Voxer chat group, because Wizard and Murphy are just like insanely chaotic together. But she was like, guys, somebody needs to hate read this book with me in June. And I need somebody to read it with me. And it is literally a paranormal romance by like a popular-ish book talk person. And
it might be, wait, is it You'd Look Better as a Ghost?
No, Bride by Allie Hazelwood.
Okay, I don't know that.
It's a vampire werewolf love affair story, and the only reason I said yes is because it's been a long time since I've like not hate read, because I'm trying not to be mean to anybody that enjoys that. You guys are awesome. My personal experience with romantasy has not been positive. So that'll be an interesting, I can't wait for that Voxer conversation. It's going to be fantastic.
I'm excited to try Sarah J. Maas. Very excited. I'm not even joking.
I'm looking forward to your thoughts.
Because I mean, I kind of pride myself on being able to identify what people may or may not like about something. So I'm imagining I will be able to kind of formulate why people like it. It doesn't mean I will like it.
I would be 100% willing to have a deep dive conversation with you.
Have you read all of them?
I have read the first 3.
Okay, yeah, I've heard book 2 is significantly better than book 1, writing wise. I'm kind of curious to see what I think of that as well. Plus, Kelsey's read them all, and she's actually read every Sarah J. Maas besides Throne of Glass at this point. And so it'd be cool to talk to her about it. But Kelsey doesn't like go hard on books very often, but she likes them. Yeah, she's like she does a lot of things that annoy me.
Yeah. I have a very close friend outside of BookTube who that's her favorite series of all time. And she has actually banned me from talking to her about it because I just ask questions that she doesn't like about it. And she's like, we're not talking about this anymore. Like, okay.
Yeah, I got one of these bros at Jiu-Jitsu, and he just reads Sanderson. He's a huge Sanderson fan. But I really like him because like he doesn't like everything Sanderson's actually done. Like, he's a good dude. And I was like, you should try this series. You should try this. I'm trying to get him to read Malazan. I'm trying to get him to read whatever. And he goes, I don't read as much as I would like to. So the next one, like the really hyped release I got to try to get to, apparently is like Fourth Wing. I've heard it's about dragons and it's sick. And I was like, his name's James. I go, James, do you know what Fourth Wing is? And he's like, no, it's fantasy. And I was like, it is, but there's also a lot of smut. And he's like, you mean like romance smut? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm saying this to him because I know him. And I'm like, you're not going to like that.
Yeah.
But you know, there's just if you want to converse with people outside of like a bubble of this bubble,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're probably better off reading something like Fourth Wing or Sarah J. Maas or I don't
Yeah.
know, like Eric Larkson or something.
I have also read all of the Twilight books because I grew up in the Twilight craze where all of my girlfriends in high school were obsessed with it. And so I've read them.
And it inspired you to write your own.
I was so mad about it that I was like, what if I wrote a YA paranormal that where like the werewolves were actually cool? That's basically where I started with it. Became something completely different after that, but like that was kind of the initial catalyst. Yeah. So what is when you're analyzing a story, whether it's going to be A Court of Thorns and Roses or Game of Thrones, what is your favorite part of a story to analyze? Now, you said your favorite theme or the theme that pulls you in is mortality and the, you know, the exploration of that. But like, what are the parts you really like to analyze?
I think I like to kind of analyze what the central like issue is for the character and like what informs his or her reactions to that. So the psychology of it, right? And this comes from probably more of the problematic POVs I've read in like contemporary fiction or lit fic or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And being in that head and being like, okay, I hate reading about this person. They are despicable. I think they should be put in front of a jury of their peers and imprisoned. However, why is this like this? And then how do I take this problematic POV and then talk about it in a public setting on the internet, which gives the most uncharitable lens to anything that you say or do?
Yep.
And most of the time doesn't actually listen to your words. And how do I do that? So I think those are the things that I take like a lot of time with. Funny enough, I'm like one of those people, you know, people are like, oh, I saw this coming from a mile away, or like, you know, the plot hole people, which I have a whole rant
I'm not
about,
that person either.
I got a whole thing about that I find annoying, but, you know, I'm not that person at all. I'm really not. And when you read something, you're not going to catch everything, you know, and that's part of like, you know, you have specialties of what you critique or whatnot. I don't know if I'd necessarily analyze or am a critic of anything, but that's just what I get attached to and what I try to relay to people that listen to me talk about books, I think.
Yeah.
What about you?
Mostly, I think characters and like the psyche of a character and their relationships are really big ones for me. I really like the sociology of books and why people do the things that they do and what their motives are. I'm also not a plot hole person unless, as an author, one of my biggest pet peeves is when I can watch as the author sacrifices the character they've built for a plot point. Like, nothing will make me madder than reading that. Where it's just like everything you've built in this character up to this point, you can see them be like, but I need them to do this. Or I need the story to do
I mean,
this.
I've run into that before in series that I love, and it always irks me quite a bit.
Yeah. Drives me bonkers. I hate that so much. But yeah, typically character relationships are a really big one for me, especially like family bonds or friendships or that kind of stuff. I love analyzing that.
Depends on what type of book too, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Like when I go into like a McCarthy book, I'm knowing that it's going to be a dude that probably had problems with his father growing up. It's going to talk about death in some way, shape, or form, and there'll be like Gnostic themes. Yeah, and all that stuff is stuff like that I will look for. But when I read epic fantasy, I'm thinking about cultures. I'm thinking about usually there's an existential threat. So I'm thinking about an existential threat and like how it makes sense in the world that we've been given and like the problems it would cause, like even logistically, which the best epic fantasies consider those things, I think. So, you know, it just depends.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It is, Matt. That drives me bonkers.
Yeah.
Anitha, are you saying that happened in Jade City?
I think maybe. I don't know if I'd have to.
I'm trying to figure out like where.
I don't know.
Send me a DM, Anita, because I'm curious.
The more I think about that series, the more I think I like Jade City maybe the best of the three.
I really like Jade City. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good series though. I think it's like pretty remarkable, you know, in the sense of like talking about it.
Yeah.
I recommended it to my friend Andrew. He loved it. He was like, dude, this is sick. He's like, this is like, and his favorite book is, I think his favorite book's Lies of Loch Lamora. I'm pretty sure.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. His favorite book's Lies of Loch Lamora now. But he's like, if I had to go for like a series, he's like, I'd probably go for Greenbone. He really, really loved some of it. Whereas I wasn't as big of a fan. But that again, that's when I totally get it.
Yeah, I do too. I read that one also after we talked last year because that one or the other two, I wrote them down. First Law, Greenbone, and LPQ. I have now read.
Hey, those are three good ones. You can talk to almost anybody now.
Exactly. That's I'm trying to catch up and like, you know, have the baseline, and then I can go off on my weird little directions and recommend other series for fans of those series. But yeah, I really liked Greenbone a lot. Lon is my favorite character, hands down.
Yeah.
Hands down. And I won't say more than that for things, for spoiler reasons. But yeah, he's hands down my favorite character. Have you read any of the like novellas after that?
No, I haven't been really pulled to be honest. I have them, but I have not read them. You know, as much as I said the setting, and I'm forgetting, it's not just Jan Loon. Is it Jan Loon? Yeah, K-Con. K-Con, I think, is distinct, and I can think of it and know things about it, but it's not a place that pulls me back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You mentioned Lies of Loch Lamora too. That's also one of my favorite series of all time, period. And I love that you gave, I was stalking your Goodreads today, and I love that you gave Red Seas Under Red Skies also 5 stars. That made me incredibly happy because it gets so much hate and it makes me so mad.
No. Yeah, it's, in my opinion, it's very good.
It's very good.
I mean, I liked it just as much as book 1. Some parts of it I like more. And then book 3 was the one almost unanimously people were like, yeah, it's not good at all. And it's this and that, but I liked it. I still thought that was, I think I gave it 4. I think I gave it 4 stars, but like, you know, it was good. The boys were doing things. I had fun. But Red Sea, that's one of those sequels that gets hate, and I just wonder if it just gets hate because it's a sequel. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I don't know. That one doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that didn't make sense to me either when I read it. The first one's still my favorite. But that's a case of a series where I feel like the world was so distinctive the whole time, and his dialogue between the characters and also the world building of that series just blows my mind.
I think that it's Gentleman Bastards is a little underrated.
Agreed.
One, for the writing of it. I think that his writing is pretty fantastic. I will say, I think it's kind of obvious that Lies was worked on longer than the other two, as far as like just tightness of things, but like it's nowhere to the level of drop off that that I find it to be like, whoa. And I don't even know if drop off's the correct word, but you could just tell that Lies was in the oven very, very long. So I feel like people don't really talk about the world as much, and they don't talk about the writing. But when you compare it, you like, let's say Scott Lynch had published 3 more books.
Yep.
I mean, it gets mentioned with Wheel of Time at that point, like Wheel of Time, Game of Thrones, like these other things. You know, I think like one of the reasons why Abercrombie is so relevant is because he's written a ton of books in this fantasy universe, and obviously people like them. But there is something to be said about like repeated success, and 3 is amazing to do. Most people don't write one good book. I think Scott Lynch has read 3 great books, but if he releases some of these, you know, I know he has a novella or something come out, but like there's talks that
he's taking like steps back, which is awesome. And like I'm a huge supporter of authors taking breaks for, you know, mental health reasons or this things coming up in their personal lives. And like, so I'm really, really excited to see. And I'm not even joking. My entire TBR flies out the window the minute Thorn of Emberlane comes out. Like,
it would be one of the most anticipated releases for me. You know, as someone who did enjoy, I enjoy King Killer. I know it gets a lot of flack, and you know, it's one of those series that's not very fun to talk about. But I definitely would be more excited for the Scott Lynch release. To me, so
I can't imagine the pressure of that. Like, especially when people have been waiting for it for so long, and I wonder if
critique
that works against the author to the point where they're like, I don't even want to do it. I like, not naming any names, but like, I don't even want to do it anymore.
Without a doubt. Without a
Yeah.
doubt. I mean, there were times, you know, whenever I'd finish a wrestling match and I'd be like, that was it. Like, that was the
Yeah.
best it'll ever be.
Yeah.
Like, I should not come back.
Yeah.
You know, and
Done.
I also I have a problem of not being able to enjoy anything.
Yeah.
Like every monumentous moment of my life, I've not enjoyed, which is very strange and disheartening.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of sympathy for people who go through that, because I think I would be one of them.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, because we've kind of touched on it a couple of times, but you've been somewhat open about, you know, your kind of mental health themes on the channel and,
Yeah,
and
I'm depressed.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always let other people, you know, say without me putting it on them, but yeah. And I think that's really important. And one of the things that, and I know I sent you a message as soon as you dropped that video was that last year?
Yeah, it was like last November. It was like in the heat of my staph infection.
Yeah. Because I do think that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like the pros and cons of booktube and reading communities in general, because I think it's something that honesty is really important, and it's not as transparent maybe sometimes as it should be. Mm-hmm. And I've found, like when we were talking even about epic fantasy series earlier, I know as a content creator, I find it really difficult to be able to say, I'm going to commit to just binging through this, you know, 10, 11 book series, or even a 6 or 7 book series. Yeah. And the pressure of there's so many things that we could dive into on this, but I would definitely be interested in having a little bit of a discussion about what you've perceived to be some of the pros and cons, especially of what's the hardest about a reading community and also content creating.
So I think combining those two things is not something that I feel too strongly about.
Sure.
I mean, my depression / mental health affect everything I do, and everything I do affects it. So
Same.
I don't think booktube or YouTube inherently does anything that I would consider a con. I have brought this with me. Mm-hmm. I also think that a lot of the pressures, quote unquote pressures of booktube, are imaginary. Yeah, I think a lot of it's illusion. I think it doesn't actually exist. I think it's a lot of it is just like these things that we feel.
We believe that we have to do these things because of whatever reason. Yeah.
Yes. This person read 40 books, therefore I need to read them. And I don't think that that's the case. And I still have yet to ever see a video of someone saying like, you need to be reading 20 books a month. Like I've never seen anyone do that, you know? It just doesn't seem to happen. So I hear people say it's like booktube makes me feel like I need pressure. Well, why do you feel that pressure? Well, I got to get through books. I can put out a video twice a week. Who told you have to put out a video twice a week? Well, it's a schedule I got to keep because this person's in. They have 100,000 subs. Oh, do you want to go full time on YouTube? No.
Right.
And you know, I've also heard a lot of people talk about how they feel like they can't stick with one series because they need variety on the channel. But I got honestly, my channel grew when I was just binging Realm of the Elderlings and Malazan, and that's all people were getting from me. That's it. So I don't even necessarily think that is a detriment to a channel. I think that is also kind of an illusion. Now, it depends on the goal, right? It depends on how big you want this thing to be or what you're trying to accomplish. And that's part of the trick, and that's part of something that can make you feel really, really bad. Is when you don't know what you want out of this, or you start to lose focus on what you wanted out of this, of making stuff for other people to watch. Now, with that said, I don't think necessarily that the platform that we use encourages like healthy behaviors with the performance stats being thrown at you, or YouTube literally being like, hey, less people like you now. You know, that's not that doesn't help. So there's
especially when you're already bringing in, you know, certain tendencies, mental health tendencies already to that. If you don't know how to manage that, it's very heavy.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel good. I mean, for me, I've had other ventures in life where like I've tried to entertain or to, had crowds or a following in these things. So for me, a lot of these feelings aren't new.
Right.
Feeling like my
Right.
time has passed, feeling like everyone that watches me or knows of me is sick of me.
Yep.
That people think I'm stupid or that
Yep.
I'm old news or whatever it might be, or the novelty of me wears off because I'm not the most unique person in the world.
Right.
But that is something I've been used to my entire life and have struggled with. So like, I guess I don't feel that booktube accentuates that any more than any other social
Right.
activity that I've had.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I don't know that I think that answers some of your question at least.
Yeah, I left it pretty intentionally vague, but one of the things that I was curious too about is, are there things that you've found helpful in managing how you relate to your channel and as
Yeah.
it pertains specifically to mental health?
Yeah. Knowing that this is optional.
Mm-hmm.
This is optional. This is something
Yeah.
I started and I did because I wanted connection with people.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it was. And, I do like being able to state my opinions and I do like entertaining people to a certain degree, and knowing that I have kind of boiled this down to what I can manage.
Right.
And that is like the most important thing, is being like, do what you think you can do for a really long time. And if that isn't that much, it's not that big of a deal. It's more about just sticking to those things and starting things that you know that you don't mind to do for a long period of time. So like those are the
Right.
ways that I kind of like healthily balance things out.
Yep.
But another thing is just saying it.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. I'm not okay. I can't do the things I want to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks. Bear with me. And I have never had a single person say, you're a weakling beta male. Actually, I did have someone tell me I was too femmy, which I thought was hilarious. It was pretty funny. Honestly, I thought it was
okay.
They were serious, but it was really funny. But most people are supportive, and
Oh yeah.
so I think like knowing those things, and also knowing that like how I do things, I am never going to be a big channel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily want to be a big channel. And I don't say that as like some kind of weird defense
No,
mechanism.
I get that.
I found a lot of success on my manga channel very fast. It was kind of depressing actually, because I've been working on the book channel for like 3 or 4 years, and I matched it in subs in like 6 months.
Yep.
With like 2 videos. And I was like, oh, okay. That's weird. And that was my wake up call, that I was like, every time I'm getting 50,000 views or 100,000 views on a video, it would send me into an anxiety spiral. Mm-hmm. And this is not uncommon. Actually, I talked to other people who are very successful on YouTube, and they're like, yeah, this is actually a pretty common thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized that I was very fortunate for what I had built on the book community. Very organic people who, it's so niche that they have to care. So they leave very thoughtful comments. And have respect for the person behind the camera, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So I think for me, like the healthiest thing was understanding that like success doing what this is like just doing it.
Yeah.
Just
having that outlet.
I have particular things that I like to do. I have things that I know what I want things to look like and how to do them. There's a method to my madness somewhat. And those are the things that I take pride in. And those are things I continue to try to get better at. And I always will. But none of that has to do with hitting 100,000 subscribers. None of that has to do with getting some sponsorships or something. I'm not saying that those things will never happen. Maybe they would, but they're not the end goal.
Right.
I'm just a dude who happens to really like talking about books.
Right.
And it has to fight this weird contradiction of myself that I simultaneously want to be completely isolated from everyone in the world while also cannot help but to be part of something bigger than myself. I don't know. And now everyone has to deal with this shit on my channel, and you guys just have to be with me. So
for some reason they keep coming around,
Yeah. And I would like to think that I give off the vibe, or I put out the bat signal or whatever for people to know what they're getting themselves into, I take a lot of pride in like production and stuff. That's why I bought this camera. You know, I mean, that's like everything I've ever gotten out of this channel, I think I've put back in as far as like money goes.
Oh yeah.
And that's because like people who give me like 2 hours of their time on every other Friday night, or spend 40 minutes watching a vlog or 20 minutes watching wrap up, like I don't take that lightly. I think time is like easily,
it's
the
very
most precious.
valuable.
Yeah, and it's cliche, but it is the most precious
Yep.
commodity, and we'll never ever get it back. So when people take that time out other days to do that, I wanted to do it in a way where I'm doing right by them. You know, I want to make them feel justified for spending time with me, and that's why I do fence sit, as I always say, is because I'm trying to see it from a million people. Like if a million people watch that video, I want to be able to see it through hopefully all of their eyes. And that might be an impossible task, but it's a task that I think is fair. You know, it's noble. It's noble. So
yeah,
I guess if that answers your question, I don't know.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I kind of intentionally left those vague just because I was that was great. But I mean,
you can't do this for 4 years pretty consistently and not think about why you do it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I mean, like I've said multiple times, starting the channel was like pretty much every booktuber was because I wanted to make friends who enjoyed books, and especially books in the genres that I enjoy. And the audience that I think we've both been able to curate on our channels has been like far beyond my wildest expectations in terms of the community that was created there. And I think in the larger space, you know, all of us kind of overlapping onto our different channels and the audience where we all have similar people that watch our channels and friends that we talk to. And it's really encouraging to know, like I took a break earlier this year for some mental health reasons. And when I came back, I was like, okay, I'm going to hit this hard. I'm going to do a bunch of live streams. I'm going to do all this stuff. And I recognized that I was getting very strong anxiety attacks before live streams. And I was like, okay, I need to take a step back and I need to like allow myself to say, we're not quite there yet. And that's okay. And like you said, being honest and just telling people, hey, I need a break for a month, or I need a break for a little bit, or however long it is. Because the communities that we've built support that. Like you said, like nobody is going to be like, oh my gosh, unsubscribe. I mean, and if they are, I don't want them in the community anyways, you know, like,
and it's all right also, like, and this happens a lot, you know, there's people who come, maybe they'll even like join my Patreon or something, and it's because I'm reading a series or even just one book that they really like, and they come in, they talk about it, had a great time, and they leave, and I'm like, you know,
there's no obligation to there's no obligation to stay.
It's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
Like it's a moment in time where you connected with a certain person about a certain subject. And when you think about that subject, you will think about that person, whether or not they stayed there. And that is like a connection. And that is really cool.
Yeah. And it's cool that there's a space that kind of acclimates to whatever that person is looking for at that moment, whether it's a really long-term, I've been watching your channel since the beginning, or I'm here for this little bit of entertainment because you're reading a certain book or series. The versatility of that is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I try not to take it too personally. Anitha, I hope you unsubscribed. You're the worst. No, I'm just kidding. Anitha's
she was just yelling at me in a chat for a different live stream like an hour ago. So, you know.
Kev had got it right. He said, Jimmy said that he'd dox me to his entire CWN stream if I left his Patreon trying to get me swatted. That is true. I am a very stern ruler. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot about like this stuff and what I do. And I guess my biggest fear is running out of things to say, or running out of people who want to hear what I have to say. That was one of the reasons why I paused the reviews for a while. And there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons why is because I felt like I was starting to say the same things, and I meant them, but like there's only so many ways to say things. And that is like one of the things I'm really big about is trying not to repeat myself too often. Now, we all have our own cliches. We all have our own sticking points and relation points that we always go back to, and those are fine. But
I really struggled with kind of a pressure when it came to reviews. It started when I first came into the community, and I'm still like working on adjusting my mental space about it. But the idea that I had to have something really intellectual to say about the books that I was reading, and I've mostly let go of that because I'm an emotional reader. I'll just say it. Like I'm not going to sit here and have like a whole PhD lecture about,
nor should you,
because that's not who I am as a person. I can never do that. And I trying to figure out, like, you know, part of my, like, bringing in my trauma into the conversation is like feeling like I have to chameleon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right? Like that's such a hard thing to break yourself of, and feeling like I have to become the person that everybody is watching, and I have to have these things to say, or I have to, you know, that's a really hard space to get out of, I think, for me at least.
It is, but you also have to remember you don't have to put yourself there. You don't have to.
Right, exactly.
That's why, like, I am super in favor of people learning and growing and understanding things. But at the end of the day, if you want to flip on the camera and talk about how Darrow did something dope in Red Rising and scream at the camera, that's what you should. That's what I want people to do. I don't believe there's any kind of standards. Like when I see people talk about standards, like, well, you should have at least read this. No.
I will never read Wheel of Time. I try not to say never, but like I can pretty safely say that is a series that I will never read. And I love hearing people talk about it, but I just know it's not going to be a fun experience for me, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you know, these, you know, if anyone ever tries to give you trouble for that, ask them if they've read all of Thomas Covenant. Ask them if they've read of all of David Eddings. Like, we could do this all day. We could gatekeep all the way back to Beowulf if we gotta. Like, we can do Hope Mirrorless. How about that? We'll do Blood in the Mist. Have you read Blood in the Mist? You didn't read Peter Tolkien? Can't talk about fantasy. Can't talk about books unless you read Critical Theory. You're unallowed.
Yeah.
Is it disallowed? Unallowed? I don't know.
Disallowed?
Yeah, I think it's disallowed. See, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that's okay. But like, no one can take your perspective of life and your experiences and talk about those books. And we're drawn to books that usually, most likely, either provide an escape from those things or reinforce those things or like make us contemplate them. And no one can bring your experience to the table or whoever it is. So yeah, I get really tuned up, you know, and as someone who does take like a lot of pride in like trying to understand like why authors do things. And I try to be somewhat technical in a sense. I will never implement that on anyone else because I don't want everyone else to talk like me. That's boring as hell. And also, I don't understand these people complain about this and are like, well, this person should talk about. I'm like, you realize that because you talk that way, you stand out. Like, why would you want to spoil the reason why you stand out? Why do you
don't want everyone to sound the same way? Yeah.
Doofus.
Well, and part of it too is like the reason that I subscribe to all of the different channels that I subscribe to and enjoy watching my friends talking about books, even the same books I've read, is because they all have like, you know, so different and unique opinions about it, and they bring different life experiences, and I love that about it. And that's something that I always try to remind myself, especially since like for reviews, I struggle to sequentially process because of my ADHD. That is something that is really hard for me.
Yeah.
And so when I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a review, I have to put it in a sequential order that makes some kind of sense. And what ends up usually happening is I throw that out the window and just kind of sort of coherently ramble for about 15 minutes. And then I say bye. So, and it works for the most part, I guess. So. Yeah.
And, you know, and this is something that I take very, you know, personal, is like making sure I'm there for the readers, you know, because like what I used BookTube for was to curate my TBR. What do I go by, you know? So like that's always been the goal with almost all the videos I make is trying to help people understand whether or not they would enjoy the book, not nothing else. I don't care about, you know, if an author gets constructive feedback from my review. That's not what I'm there for.
No,
they shouldn't listen to me. I'm an idiot. There's no reason. There's no reason.
Yeah.
That they should be listening. Now, if they watch it and they enjoy it, Tad, I know you're out there, that's cool.
Shout out.
Shout out to Steven Erickson. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not expecting it. And I
Right.
certainly am not going in with the intention of that.
Right. No.
Yeah.
That was another thing that was mentioned. This was a while ago now that I'll just say too, is that like I didn't actually say that reviews are for authors. I'm just putting that out in the stratosphere for other interested parties.
Yeah. I've always been a believer that reviews are for
yes.
readers.
Yes.
That's kind of the goal, I think, behind them. Now, I know like Philip's like, I would never say anything that I wouldn't say to an author's face, but and I'm not crapping.
I'm mostly of that opinion as well. Mostly like I'll say that I didn't like the book.
It sounds like a good idea. I think it's a bad idea on the whole, personally, because I don't know about you.
I think it depends on how honest you're willing to be to the author.
So yeah, you're an author.
Yeah.
Now, would you want to hear me tell you my opinion, or would you like to have a hole in the wall that you put your ear up to and I don't know you're listening?
I mean, if my hope is that you would be willing to tell me actually what you thought of my
yes,
book. But however, I will note that a lot of authors can't handle that. Like, here's the thing. I had somebody tell me that they threw my book in the garbage when I was 16 years old. So
that's encouraging.
Yeah. So like I've been there already. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like I'm honestly not offended by people that I may disagree. That's fine. But like, if you read Bloodstones and you were like, this really bothered me, I really hated this part, I'd be like, okay, like, honestly, okay. Yeah. Because I'm recognizing that not every book is going to be to everyone's tastes and etc. So it's not like, I don't know, but I get where the larger sphere of readers, authors, and reviewers would have a harder time with those more open and honest conversations.
Yeah, the problem with this approach is that it's not equal.
Yeah.
I would say many different things to your face than I would say to, I don't know, Fonda Lee's face.
Sure.
I know you.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe because I know you, I'm softer with you and I'm meaner to Fonda Lee, to her face. Like for instance, if you're talking to me or Alan and you were reviewing our BookTube videos, the threshold of offense is vastly different between two individuals, right? Mm-hmm. So like I said, it feels as if like it sounds like a good thing, but to me, I don't know if an application, it's actually a worthy way of going about it.
Yeah, that's fair. Daniel, that's how I get you. I don't know why I'm clicking on this comment and it is not showing up.
I read Tori's books on my Kindle. So, oh, here we go.
There we go.
So it'd be unwise for me to throw them in the trash.
That's how we get you. You can't. This is why it is important for authors to, this is my little soapbox. This is why it is important for authors to have other author friends, that when you get a bad review that makes you mad, because it will happen, it's human, you can go to your author friend and be like, that's great. Just like the readers should be allowed to go to their reader friends, be like, I hated this book, right? Like, that's fine. That's good. That's a good thing.
And I think that that's a good approach for booktubers too. Yes. I mean, you know how many times I get a terrible comment, I just send it to Alan. I'm like, dude, look at this. This dude told me I was a femboy. I don't even know what that means. He asked me what size shoes I wear. I don't even know what that means. But I try, and maybe every now and then I'll share one in like my Discord because like it's really funny. But for the whole of it, like I think like keeping those things in house is like a good idea, anyways. And like I would be shocked if authors weren't offended or upset by bad like reviews that hate them. I'm sure we're sucks.
Still human. Yeah.
I used to go on the internet boards and look at reviews of my matches, and people would say, I wasn't worth I wasn't worth a dime, or they hope I die or break my neck in the ring in my next event. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't like that stuff, but that's part of entering the public domain. That is, you're in the ring for better or for worse. Yeah. People get to use whatever rating scale they want, whatever star system or whatever, right? Like there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, there's honestly like I think because I have been self-published for so long, and also because when I first started, I was very young and I was around a lot of authors who were traditionally published in a time when self-pub was not what it is now. And that gave me a very different, like, I can handle pretty much anything at this point. Like, and I'm not heartless. So yeah, if somebody gives me a 1-star review, it depends on what for, to be honest. If the person is like, this just wasn't for me, that's fair. You know, if they pick apart something that like, I can be like, that's not actually what that, okay.
Yeah.
You know,
it depends on the day.
It depends on the day. Absolutely.
I can laugh comments off. Sometimes I get a comment and I'm like, that bothers me. Like, and it'll ruin my day, you know, and
Yeah.
that sucks. You know, it doesn't happen often, but it can happen.
I've had most pretty much fine, because I'm really grateful to be a smaller channel for that reason as well, because I know that some of the things that other female booktubers have told me they have to deal with being larger channels is like crazy. Really disturbing. But I've had comments that usually I delete. The ones that I delete are the ones that actually make me mad. And I only delete ones that are wildly inappropriate. Like, I'm not out here censoring people. So nobody's worried. But like, yeah, I mean, there's been some comments where I'm just like, sometimes putting my face on the internet, I'm like, why do I do this? And then the wonderful audience shows up and I'm like, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, I talk too much. I'm tired of talking. Like I feel like on average in a week, I talk too much.
Sure.
I think about that all the time. But like, yeah, I mean, you're gonna have days where that's the feeling. But like, you know, I always think, I don't know if you remember this, but when you first started your channel, when you first got your first thumbs down, were you like, who hates me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. And But I was like, you know what? Like now every video gets down like 10, 12, 30, it doesn't matter. You know, but if you think about in a room and you had 1,000 people and 990 of them hit the up, they want to talk to you, they're cool. And then you got 10 people who hate, and you put them all in a room. Like, who are you going to go pay attention? Who are you going to go party with? Like, you're going to party with these people. And when you think about it like that, I don't think it's as bad.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Thanks for sharing, DK. Honestly. Like it is funny too, because phased in the community I'm in, we're all like largely adult fantasy and just adult genre-esque. So yeah, I mean, phased is definitely not like in its target audience, and I can completely understand that.
Yeah, I didn't read phase because I don't really like werewolves and I'm not into YA, but I am interested in the bloodstones, as Alan would say, because it's more up my alley.
You have heard what the nickname version of it is, though, right? Did I tell you that?
I think you did, but not
the Fruity Pebbles.
The Fruity Pebbles.
Yeah, I think Pete came up with that.
Like it. Yeah. I dig that.
It is also known as Bloody Rocks in my Discord.
Bloody Rocks is also a very good name.
Yeah, maybe I'll do a special edition and call it Bloody Rocks.
I mean, just talk to Broken Binding. They're going to print my last script I had for my video. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But my God.
I know. I'm like, what aren't they printing at this point? Yeah.
Crazy.
It is wild. I will say I did get the Never Die special edition. I don't even know where I put it here. Recently, and I'm kind of obsessed with it. I mean, usually
they do fantastic work.
I don't usually swing for special editions because I don't usually read them because I'm afraid that they're gonna
fall apart. That's how I felt about my Way of Kings leatherbound. I read like 2 or 3 chapters in it for Lost in Roshar, and I was like,
the anxiety's not worth it.
But also, like, it doesn't feel like it's going to hold up. And like, I remember them sending out things saying these are not meant to be read. Whereas like my folio, Song of Ice and Fires, I read them. They're very, very readable. I kind of hate that whenever books aren't readable. But then I have some books that are just, I'm like, I'm not even gonna risk it. I don't know if it's readable. I'm not touching it. It's on the
Right.
shelf, Mylar wrap. It's not moving. We'll leave it
I'm
there.
also too stingy. Like, I have a hard time shelling out large amounts of money for a nice edition of a book that's just kind of shelf candy, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. That's just not like my entire Malazan collection is so mismatched. It's fine.
Yeah, I literally have my Dragonbone chair Grim Oak press like right here, and I was using it as a stand. So
Love
I don't
that.
know.
Yeah.
Apparently, I'm not treasuring this as much as I should. There's a plate on top of it currently.
Love that. Yeah.
Not great. Do love this edition.
You might want to move it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. I'm like, man, that's privilege
fine.
is what that is. I need to take
First world country in a photograph. Yeah. I was going to ask if there are, because I feel like now that after a year past chatting with Nuts, we've gotten to know each other a little bit better, reading tastes a little bit better. What would you say now are like 2 to 3 books that you would put on my TBR that I haven't read yet? Besides Tad Williams, because that's a given.
I don't see. My problem is I read a lot of depraved stuff, so I'm like,
which we've established, yes.
how much do I want you to judge me for said picks? You know what? I'm going to recommend Soldier Son. I've only read book 1.
Okay,
but you like Robin Hobb's writing?
I do. Right? Yes,
you
I
like
think
military
she's quite talented.
Stuff.
Yes.
I think that might be a book that you could enjoy. I think it's not going to be amazing. Like, it's not perfect, but there are a lot of things that she does really, really well with it. So I would love to see that.
All right.
But well, Laura stole the next one from me, which was going to be Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. I think that this book is awesome. Now, when you get into Bone Clocks, what you have to prepare yourself for is that it's essentially like novellas put together.
Sure.
It's all cohesive narrative. It's not as like out there as Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is totally out there. But Bone Clocks is a narrative, but like it jumps time in POVs. Yeah. And it's told from a lot of different perspectives. And I think that Mitchell does differing character voices better than anyone I've ever read.
Yeah.
I think he's just insane. So those are the 2 that like immediately I pick. I also have a feeling that you might like Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver.
I have heard that one before.
But I'm not 100%, but I think you could enjoy it possibly. Okay.
I'm one of the things I've noticed in a lot of the books that you have really read and loved, I struggle with a little bit books that I feel like I'm going to get to the end of it and be like, I have no idea what the hell just happened. And I feel like you enjoy that to some degree.
I do. Yeah.
So like you really enjoyed Gene Wolfe.
Yeah.
I am notorious for having a sour look on my face when anybody brings up Gene Wolfe in conversation in a live stream, and I just kind of shut up and wait for them to be done. So I'm curious, like, what is it about those books that really draws you in? Do you like trying to puzzle it out?
I think puzzling out is kind of fine, but I like books that make me engage with it. Like, I enjoy reading just a smooth book that goes down and you get through it and you're done. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Those books are great, and I enjoyed that experience. I think that, like, for instance, like an example would be Kazuo Ishiguro, like The Remains of the Day or The Pale View of Hills. Like, very smooth. There's not, it's not super densely written, and I love that stuff. However, when books ask a little bit more of me and I feel like they're respecting me, that I like that. I like that a lot. Now, as far as Book of the New Sun, I just love the way he writes. Like, just the way that he would go through and you're on this journey with Severian, who's like such a lying piece of trash at times. Like, it just, those things compel me to continue reading. Now, as far as like things being nebulous or like, up in the air, I guess is how you would describe it. I don't really care that much about endings. That doesn't mean that an ending can't ruin a book or make a book for me.
Sure.
But, on the whole, I don't think endings have as much stock in them as many of the other people that I know. I think it's because I don't need a point to a book. That's another thing. I'm about to sneeze possibly. So if I mute randomly, that's why. I feel it coming on. But I don't need a point to something. Like when someone ends a story. So for instance, I read Remote Control by
Nnedi Okorafor.
Yes. And the number one thing you'll see on Goodreads for the 1 stars, or what was even the point? And to me, that is nothing more I could care less about. You can find your own point, folks.
Right.
Like, you know, unless if you always want the big twist.
You don't need the hand holding all the time.
No, and sometimes a story is just a story.
Right.
And you know, we can go back and forth about this, but for me personally, I don't have to have a resolution to things. So like for instance, I like that novella quite a bit. But if you're someone who needs a resolution to everything and needs to explain why everything mattered, Chekhov's gun, all that, do not read it. You won't like it. But I don't know. I guess it's because I look at life and I don't think there's much point to life. Like at the end of it all, I'm like, what's the point really? So maybe that is like just the way I'm built. Like maybe that's the way I think.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me because that's kind of my reality. Like that's the reality I live in.
Yeah.
Makes me sound crazy, actually, now that I hear it out loud. But, I don't know. Maybe that's it. Or maybe I'm just dumb. I don't know. It's one or the other.
My thing is like when I've read exactly one Gene Wolfe book, and I'm sure someone will guilt trip me into reading another one at some point. Probably my husband, because he's a massive Gene Wolfe fan. But I got done with the book, and like I don't like books where I like to be brought into the story. I like to be immersed in the story and be allowed to like be part of it in terms of the imagination and the immersion and all of that kind of stuff. I felt like when I read the Gene Wolfe book that I was just reading words that were written by an author who wanted me to know how stupid I was.
I've heard this before.
And I don't love that.
I don't know if that's incorrect.
Right.
I think Gene Wolfe is like, watch this shit. Like, watch what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
There's something self-indulgent about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I read it, had no idea. I read Fifth Head of Cerberus.
Okay. I've heard that one's out there.
Had no idea what happened in the entire book. I was so confused. I sat down with Ben, my husband, afterwards, and he explained everything to me. And I still didn't have a clue what was going on. So at that point, I was just like, I'm sorry. Like, I have to, like, I don't think there always has to be a point to a book necessarily, but I want to get something out of it personally.
I totally understand that. That's why, like, you know, I don't openly just be like, everyone should read Book of the New Sun. This is the greatest thing. I do think there's something really interesting whenever, like, you read something on the surface level and you move on. This happens in Song of Ice and Fire all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And people read it, they move on, and then that's it. But if you're willing, if you go back now, the difference is the Song of Ice and Fire at its surface level is very entertaining. And, I would say for the most part, has resolutions, at least in the first 3 books of things and whatever, there's payoffs. But if you go back and you read it, like there's deeper things, like you can get even more out of it, or you see hidden things that you never knew.
Love that. I love layered.
Layered. Yeah. And I think that Wolfe does that really well, except the fact that sometimes everything's just this big, like, metaphor or allegory for some biblical thing. And I also don't mind those necessarily, but like for instance, in Book of the New Sun, I don't like the plays. I've had people explain to me the plays and why they're amazing, and like I go, okay, that's cool. I don't like them. Like I just don't like them.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I'm not going to pretend like I did. You know, I didn't enjoy them. I'm sure that they have super significance, and if you know, good old Eugene was here today, he would tell me, but he's not, and I don't care. But there's a ton of the stuff with the unreliable narrator that I think makes the books really fascinating to read. I also like something where you can like reread multiple times. I think that's
absolutely
cool.
Yeah, I love that. But I want to have loved it so much on the first read that I want to go back and reread it again.
I don't blame anyone for not liking something like a Book of the New Sun. I think Book of the New Sun's almost the most extreme version of that, at least in our realm. There's other people that do this too. I tried to read Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, and I got like, I don't know how long I got into it, but I was like, you know what? I'm fine. I'm okay if I don't get this one. It defeated me.
I have not, Sal. Is that Blood in the Mist is not the same thing, I'm assuming.
No, this is Latro in the Mist. This is Gene Wolfe. Yep.
Oh, no, I have not. I read The Fifth Head of Cerberus, and that was my Gene Wolfe experience.
That's what I said. Why, Jimmy? Why? Well, Infinite Jest, it's just a book people talk about, and I had a Amazon gift card, so I ordered it and I read it, and I really liked the first chapter, and then everything after that I didn't at all, and then I started looking up the references. I was like, this is not what I want to do with my time.
Mm-hmm.
Pete is reading Infinite Jest for the past 3 years. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to say no because I haven't read any other ones. So like, I can't really compare it to anything else he's written, but from everything that I've heard from my husband's experience reading his books, from booktubers that I know and respect reading his books, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it wasn't a good Gene Wolfe to start with. However, I don't know that I'd have a better experience with his other books.
Yeah, I've only read Book of the New Sun, so I can't speak to it. I just know that there are large swaths of Book of the New Sun that I didn't know what was happening. And I was just kind of chilling. I think there's parts of it you probably would like, but sure. Sal's probably read a lot more than me, so I would.
Well, I was going to say this one, I think Ben has it on his shelf, actually. Is that the one about the soldier? That's probably, if so, that's probably why it's being recommended. But
Brent is right as well. He said I think Second Apocalypse is actually an example of Challenger reader, but are still pretty readable. Yeah, and even that one for a lot of people goes too far in Thousandfold Thought and the sequels. But I agree. I mean, I read one of the chapters I think 4 times because it was like, what? It switched to like second person, and you're like, what in the hell is happening in this book? But I was so invested in just the weirdness that was Irwa. But if you're not invested in it, I'm sure it's just slop. Like people probably reading are like, what? No, this is dumb.
And in fairness to Gene Wolfe,
Eugene, big fan of the channel.
Eugene, yep. As I mentioned earlier, the struggle that I have with sequential processing.
Mm-hmm.
I also rely on certain types of plot structure that allows me to kind of ground and move a rung up the ladder at a time with the story. Yes. Gene Wolfe does not allow you to do that, really, at least in the book that I experienced.
Severian is you're basically like, and I'm just talking about Book of the New Sun here, but like, you go on a trip with Severian. It's the fantasy adventure story, but instead of a guy who kills people, he heals people. Like it's there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to Book of the New Sun, but at the end of the day, it's an adventure story.
Yeah,
which is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David wants to know if you think Second Apocalypse or Malazan is harder to read.
Second Apocalypse. The sequels are sometimes incoherent, and then he didn't have an editor for the last 2 books, and it shows. So I mean, like, Malazan is difficult because of like scope and and nebulous magic system, or whatever, which is fine. But like Second Apocalypse is like, I don't know, the sequel stuff. Like there are chapters that people are still trying to decipher what exactly we saw. And I love that. Nothing wrong with if you're into books with dark setting undertone. Well, I wouldn't say I like optimism. But I'm not going to say I'm not willing to give it a shot. I'm looking it up right now. Netherworld. Let's see. Netherworld. I don't see. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh, is this older? It looks older.
Probably.
Yeah, new ed edition with biographical introduction. It's a world classic. How long is this though? That's the real kicker.
837. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that doesn't say, so I'll have to look it up. But I will look at it.
What's your threshold of when you page count when you start to go, eh?
If it's over 450 nowadays, I'm like, it's gotta come with a heavy recommendation.
Right.
Because I have so many long books. I mean, I was just telling my friend today, there are so many series that I want to like odd series or not popular ones that I want to give time to.
Yeah.
So for stuff to jump that, it's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah.
You know, there's stuff that has been published in like the last 15 years that like is not popular, at least in our sphere, that have multiple books and have ended, and people who have read it loved it. Like, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, so please don't ask me which ones they are, but I have them downstairs. Okay, I have them downstairs.
So Jimmy, which one? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right? I gotta look. But I get recommendations from so many different people, and I start looking at stuff up, and I'm like, man, this is pretty good. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Mitch wants a book rec that has Limp Bizkit vibes.
Don't know. Read the lyric sheet from Hot Dog. I don't know, bro.
There are some recs coming in the chat, so there are some people on top of it apparently.
Library of Mountain Char is crazy. That is a Black Leopard Red Wolf for sure. Daniel, you're out of your mind. Absolutely not. That is ridiculous.
Oh man. So is there a book or a couple of books that you can safely recommend to like just the general population of people? Like not specifically, but because it's, you know, I feel like I'm very hesitant with specific people. They say, hey, give me a recommendation for X. I always want to know what they already like, so that I can find something that either they will like or something that's like enough in their wheelhouse, but might challenge them a little bit.
Yeah, it just depends on the person, where they're coming from, what their preconceived notions are of, like, for instance, like fantasy. It's really hard not to go with like the really generic answers, and that's the ones that all of us diehards are like sick of hearing, and that's why I feel things like The Expanse with the noise whenever people now. But like at the end of the day, I'd probably pick Mistborn. I tell people all the time.
That's fair.
I tell people all the time, I recommend Wheel of Time to people. And more times than not, the person enjoys it. I don't even like Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
But, those big series that have resonated with millions of people, like, why wouldn't I recommend that? It's a great starting point. We all got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I
agree.
I started out, reading, Harry Potter or whatever, and then end up where I am. But also a big piece of that was me reading team sports series for teens.
Mm-hmm.
That is maybe more formative to my reading than almost anything until Song of Ice and Fire, actually.
Yeah.
And nobody would have said that Carl Duker is the pathway to unlocking, Malazan or whatever, but apparently it was for me.
Yeah. I do think it is interesting how, like, if you go back in childhood, those like really formative either cartoon series or like, things that you wouldn't think, like even in terms of like books that I read when I was a kid, White Fang was hugely influential to me as a kid. Hugely. White Fang by Jack London.
Why does that sound so familiar?
You've probably heard of Call of the Wild.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because that's the one everybody knows. White Fang is better, in my opinion. They're both good, but White Fang is superior, in my opinion. And like, if you look at the type of characters and storytelling styles that I like now, it makes total sense. Like, it fits so well with what I enjoy now. And I think in a lot of ways encouraged me toward fantasy because the protagonist is a wolf who doesn't speak essentially but it's all through his perspective. Right. And like, that's a very kind of fantasy way to take that. But yeah. Sal, go ahead.
Let me read to you one of my favorite books as a teen reader. Okay. And tell me, like, just how this sounds.
Okay.
As the star closer for his high school baseball team, Shane Hunter is untouchable. Firing fastballs at 90 miles per hour, he loves being a winner. But when his father is accused of a crime, Shane's charmed world is turned upside down. Nothing is the way it once was. Shane's not sure what he wants to or even can pitch ever again. But like baseball, life sometimes throws you curves. And Shane discovers it's how you play the game that counts most of all. Like,
love it.
One of my favorite books of all time. And that does not sound like something that would ever lead to where I am
intrigued.
today.
I grew up with a dad that absolutely loved baseball, and that was like a connection thing with him. So I'm not bothered by that at all.
Oh, I honestly would love for people to read the book Heart of a Champion by Carl Duker. It's the first book I remember making me cry, and I cried in English class, and it is so good.
Nice.
There's also a really weird scene with like this Playboy magazine, and I just remember it like very vividly for some reason. I'm like, why is this in a teen book? So it's probably, if I reread it, I'd probably be like, this is so messed up. But in my memories, I'm like, man, that was really cool.
That kind of made me laugh because on a sort of related note, when we have a tiny little library because I live in rural Minnesota, but our library actually has a little manga section, which is quite impressive, and I was very proud of them. But it's like they have Berserk listed. All of the manga is listed under YA, all of it.
Well, there's children,
and I get that, but like when you see like, what's that one that I just read? I can't even remember, but it's like all of these like fluffy mangas, and then you've got like, Spy Family and Tokyo Ghoul and like, whatever, and then Berserk, and I'm just like, I want so badly to take one of those up to my little old lady librarians and just open the first page and be like, ladies, I know this has the first page. I'm like, I know that this has a very tiny explicit sticker on it, but like, I feel like we might need to do slightly more than that.
I am shocked that it's even in the library, if I'm being completely honest with you.
They have no idea.
Brutal.
No
just have them read the Lost Children arc and be like, do you think we should should they or should they not read it? I was done with the Lost Children arc, and I was like, Guts is awesome. People were like, you're not supposed to cheer for Guts. And I'm like,
oh.
I'm kidding. It's very obvious.
Sal had a question, and I just started reading Discworld this year, and I'm absolutely loving it.
Discworld, everything I've read from Discworld I've enjoyed, which is like two things, but like I never could go for it.
What'd you read?
Mort and Reaper Man.
Okay, nice.
Liked both, and never feel called to pick it up. I don't know why.
That's fair. Arrows of the Queen.
I've never heard of this.
What is this?
Or if I have, I've forgotten about it.
Is it by Robin Hobb? It's going to make Derry happy.
Mercedes Lackey.
Ah.
It has a 4.14 with 38,000 ratings. 1987. Sounds like epic fantasy to me.
Nice.
Actually, this does sound kind of sick. See, guys, just when you think you've read it all, there's so much. There's so much more.
Man, I have daily anxiety looking at my TBR. So,
well, there's a 1-star rating on it from 2014. It said, a friend gave me this book for my birthday, and I'm glad I didn't pay my own money for it. From a purely technical perspective, this is possibly the worst published book that I have ever read. Love that.
I love just reading 1-star reviews. Sometimes it's fun.
But they don't like Frankenstein. They said it's one of the worst books since Frankenstein.
I don't trust anybody that doesn't like Frankenstein, if I'm being honest.
What? That is not. That's very interesting.
You've read Frankenstein, right?
Long time ago.
Okay.
Long time ago. We read it in school, if I remember correctly. But I remember liking it, and also like just in general what the story's about. Like I enjoy that. What a weird book to compare a fantasy book from 1987 to, though. Strange. In my next book haul, I actually have the Heralds of, I don't know if there's like a lot of books, apparently. But my friend Casey got me this for my birthday because she really loved it, and she thinks I'm going to really love it. So interesting.
I'm cool with that. Yeah.
And Only Best Fantasy Novel says that the trilogy ends nuts. So that's also very interesting. Beltube says, I think Petrick 1-starred the lines of Al-Rasan, The Shame. Yeah, it was crazy. It's like one of the craziest reviews I've ever read after I read the book. And I was like, Because I think in that review, Patrick says that like if you do not know the history of which it's based on, you cannot read the book and understand it, which is just objectively incorrect. Like I couldn't know less about that historical period, and I read the book and it was fine.
Yeah. That's actually the one I'm thinking about starting with.
It's a great book
for GGK.
It's a great book. In fact, I think if you don't like it, you could probably just not read GGK and you'd be okay. Like read Tigana because it's nothing like it. But outside of that, like,
I have Tigana's been on my TBR for ages, and I think I have Sailing to Sarantium in there somewhere. But
Sarantium's a slammer.
I think based on what I've been hearing that Lions of Elrasan would be a good starting point for me.
I love Lions of Elrasan. Yeah, Song for Our Bone is the best. So be careful if you start with it because I don't think anything so far has been as good. But I haven't read everything from him, so what do I know?
My husband started it early this year and DNF'd it.
Dang. Yeah. GGK for some people is like very boring and very dry. But I happen to love it. And Song for Our Bond is definitely the one I like the most.
Yeah. I know a lot of people really loved it because that really kind of boomed last year. A lot of people read it.
Yeah. Song for Our Bond is probably, it would probably make like a top 20 novels list for me. Maybe.
Okay.
I could see it.
Would it be really hard for you to do a top 10 or not really?
Yeah. I mean, the hardest thing, like, cause I wanted to do authors this year, but like, it's also hard to like figuring out like how I want to like pick those authors and how many books have I read from them. So like with books, I think books, it gets a little easier actually, because like, there's not this weird thing where I've read 16 books from Robin Hobb. I didn't love every one of them.
Right.
But I loved a lot of them. So how does that compare to someone I've read 3 books of? So actually I think books might be a little bit simpler. The harder thing would be deciding if I'm going to do more than one book from an author,
right?
Because then the top 5 is just all George R. Or the top 7 or 8 are probably all George R. Martin, and that's not very fun. That's not a list. People like. In fact, it'd be kind of hilarious. Like at number 8, George R. Martin. Number 7, George R. Martin. Just keep doing it. I would get destroyed in the comments.
I sat down and I was like, okay, I've read quite a few series all the way through, but I realized I've started so many series that like I feel like I need to read some more series before I actually put out a top 10 fantasy series.
That was always my thing. I always felt like I needed to read more. And one of the last ones I said I wanted to read was Book of the New Sun, and I've read it.
There you go.
There's a zillion other things I'd like to read, but I've read a lot of the mainstream stuff. So top 10 lists are kind of the thing right now. And I'm like, if I do that, I fear I will give off the impression that I just want them sweet, delicious views. But in reality, I've just been waiting so long to make these because I wanted to read it. So
I did a video last year where I ranked all of the series that I had read. Because I felt like I could do that a little bit easier as opposed to just being like top 10 out of the like 14 that I've read,
I'll tell you a trend I like. Tier ranking every book I've ever read.
I was actually thinking about going through.
I love it. I know maybe some people will be like, oh, that's way too long. It's boring or something. From a personal perspective, I would do that without an audience. That sounds like so much fun.
It does.
And it would be challenging. It'd be really challenging. When you see hundreds of the books that you've read put out onto a page, into a tier list, it would be conflicting to say the least.
One of the videos I'm going to do for this next month is tier ranking the books I read in my first year on BookTube. Going back now.
I very much would like to do that.
I'm so excited about it.
I got to right some of my wrongs.
That's the thing is like, I want to have tiers in there. It was like, was I too generous? Was I not generous enough? Do I remember reading this? But yeah, that's one of the ideas this next month that I'm probably most excited about because I don't even remember what I read the first year of BookTube. And I can guarantee you there were a lot of books of me trying to read in a part of BookTube that I hadn't really found my spot yet. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I may randomly just go live and tier rank every book I've ever read. That might happen.
That would be amazing. I will watch it.
It might take me 6 hours.
I have watched tier ranking videos, like 3-4 hour videos all the way. Like I have watched the entire thing.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do it. That sounds like something that is on brand for me and sounds really challenging. So I might just do that.
That'd be awesome.
I was take an edible or something and make a day of it. It'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I did the 5 stars that I've given in fantasy recently.
Yeah, it's tough because there's so many things I've given 5 stars to that wouldn't get 5 stars today. But
I was surprised as I was scrolling through. I was like, there's a lot of 5 stars.
I'm not a tough grader. This year was the first year where I really tried to start embracing the full scale of stars. But like I've never until this year, I've really put very little thought into.
Well, funny you should mention that, actually.
Oh no.
So when I say I went through your Goodreads shelves.
Wait, did you print stuff out?
Because I had to remember the title of this book.
You killed a tree?
I have notes. And we got to like a third of it, and that's totally fine. So you have exactly 2 1 stars on your Goodreads. One of them, and I'm dying to know why this merited a 1 star, because I just started laughing when I saw it. Okay, ready?
Okay.
The Complete Software Developer's Career Guide: How to Learn Programming Languages Quickly, ace your programming interview, and land your software developer dream job.
Yeah, that guy's a grifter, bulldog coder or whatever. Yeah, that guy sucks.
1 star.
Yeah, he basically. So whenever you're learning how to code, there's a zillion people out there that have the answers, right, and all this stuff. And I got duped by that guy into his book. And as I started going through it and working through it, and the more people I talked to actually in the industry were like, dude, this is trash. Now I'm not saying he's never helped anyone, and I'm certainly not saying that everything in there is bad, but I didn't end up getting anything out of that book. And also as a human being, I did not. I think it's a grifter.
So what you're saying is the character arcs were just garbage.
Garbo. Didn't help me in any of my technical interviews. Didn't help me get a job. Dude sucks. I don't even know if he's still around.
So you didn't have your dream job after reading this book?
No, I did not. Now, I still own that book downstairs. So maybe I should go back to it now that I've been deving for like 6 years and go like, see maybe if I'm wrong, but I don't know. No, I didn't have a plot. No plot. Dude was very much in that grind set bullshit.
The other one, and I should have put them both on here, but the other one was, I don't know if it was a fantasy book, but I can't even remember the title of it.
The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie.
There you go.
Book sucks.
That's a fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah, it sucks.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the main characters is a rock. Limestone.
Interesting choice.
Literally limestone.
Interesting choice.
Not Dwayne Johnson. Limestone.
I mean, okay, but Jimmy, in our last conversation, we did talk about how fantasy authors are not willing to take any risks. Hey, sometimes you swing, sometimes you miss, and the bat flew out of her hand and she hit a child in the head. Is not good. Now, here's the thing I will say. I said this whenever I read it. It's very well written. Anne Leckie is obviously super talented. Yeah. I just read the book and I was like trying to come at it from these things. And she even included some stuff that I really liked. But at the end of that book, I was just like, that sucked. Like, that's just, it was one of the very few books that I read that I really regretted reading. Yeah.
Now, what I will say is I read that at a time where I was not as well read. So maybe if I reread it today, I would like it a little bit more. I bet you I would. But I like standing on business of the fact that when I read it, I was upset as all get out.
Yeah.
But there are books in retrospect I would like to give 1 stars to.
So would you say that then that reading experience was a failure in empathy?
I would say so. I was so there for the premise. I was there for the main character starting out. I was like, okay, this is a really interesting main character being a fantasy world.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, it just failed to entertain. I didn't get anything from it. Didn't move me at all. So, but again, who knows? Maybe I'd like it better now. But I'll tell you what books I'd give in retrospect 1 stars. I would give Will of Ascension 1 stars.
Okay.
I should have given the first Mistborn era 2 book 1 stars.
Okay.
Let me think here. What other ones? Fires of Heaven by Wheel of Time. I should have given that because, and I'm not talking about like objective. This is my personal experience. Like thinking about how much I did not,
which is fair. Yeah.
I probably should have given that 1 star based on how I'm rating books nowadays. What else is out there that I probably would have given a lower rating to? I mean, there's a lot of stuff I would have been lower rating to, but those are the ones that stick out in my head that maybe I would have, knocked down. Sal says, any 5 stars that you would knock down to 1 star? Absolutely not. No. Hasn't changed that much. But for instance, like Rage of Dragons is probably not a 5-star book, right? I loved that book when I read it. But like now going back to it, I'd probably give it like 3.5 stars. There's some stuff in there that isn't amazing. But like I did love the experience of reading Rage of Dragons. And I actually like the sequel.
Really Nobody talked about the sequel. I haven't read it yet. I read Rage of Dragons. That was my first reading vlog ever on the channel. It was like so 3 years ago. I haven't read them.
I know we're talking about progression fantasy and stuff nowadays, but like Rage of Dragons had that same shonen vibe. And it was I wish you'd write the 3rd book. I would like to read it. But man, Fires of Vengeance, just nobody read it.
Did you like it better than the first one or no?
No, but I think he improved. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I really didn't have any problems with the second one, so maybe I would. I don't know. That's a tough question. I'd have to reread them. But I just remember really liking book 2 and be like, sick. Book 3 is coming out soon, and it's now like 3 or 4 years, and I know he's kind of struggling with it. Which take your time. I don't think this whole book a year thing is good. On the whole, I don't understand why that's the new standard for these things. That's
why I was so glad when like Pierce got to Lightbringer and was like, nope, this isn't working. I've lost sight of what I'm doing here. I need to like hermit for a while and just figure it out. And like the fact that he took the time, I think more authors should be comfortable doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the publishers are a big part of it.
Oh, for sure. But even in self-pub, one of the things I talk about in self-pub a lot in conversation that drives me a little bonkers is the hustle culture of, like you said, I mean, it's like, keep your relevance, you get books out as often as you can stand it. And I'm just like, no, like, I've told people Queen's Wolf will not be out within a year of Bloodstones because I can't write the book I want to write that fast. I can't do it. So
yeah, I'm stressed out by books that come out every year. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
It's just how I am. I know that's a bias and it's not always accurate, but
yeah, I'm typically more skeptical if I see a very short window between books being published. I'm like,
bro, the Fourth Wing sequel came out in like 7 months or some madness. It was like 1,000 pages. Like, no, there ain't no way. There ain't no way it's good.
No. I mean,
there are some, but there are some people who can do it. There are some people who can do that.
100%. So. They are not
they're the exception.
They're the exception. Exactly. Yeah.
I know people will get real mad about winds and doors of stone and all these things, but I think people also forget that like sometimes books used to like take 20 years to come out. Like that is not uncommon.
I think that's a good point, Rogue, too. Like it depends on how long the book is too, because
5 novels for 200. That's Rogue, you are very correct. But Leo Tolstoy, his wife was brutal on him. I remember he wrote I remember someone wrote something about how like he wrote Anna Karenina and he like wanted to work on his next project, and she's like, I don't know if you have another good book in you. And he wrote another book, and she was like, yeah, you don't got it anymore. And then he took like a long hiatus, and then he came back, I think, with Even Ilyich, and she was like, okay, you still got it. Like it was like that. Like it was not a guarantee that like everything he released was good, and like he took time between them, and that's just one example. But
and I think it depends on, because like writing the Bruhai trilogy, it's so exhausting. It is so exhausting to build a world of that scope with all these different characters and all the politics going on and all of the things. And so like I'm also working on a single first-person narrative shorter book right now at the same time that's kind of giving me a little bit of a like brain break on and off from the big trilogy. And those I can write faster, right? Because you're in one person's head. It's a shorter story. It's more contained. So, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why you see people say, like, put out, okay, I'm starting this book in this series and this book in this series. And because that's kind of what I've done. And I found that to be really beneficial. I am still going to finish them all,
Mhm.
But yeah, I think especially with epic fantasy, take your time, please, God, take your time.
When you write your books, like, are you ever concerned that what you have isn't entertaining enough?
Oh, 100%.
That's like my biggest hang up with writing.
Yeah.
I'm always like, who cares about
Yeah.
what I have to say? You know, like
There will be some days where you'll look at what you wrote and you're like, this is really good. Did I write that? Like, I don't remember. Right. That's really good. Good job. And then there'll be like the same day, like you'll be like, okay, actually this is garbage and I should be never allowed near a keyboard again. So yeah, it is definitely a roller coaster of imposter syndrome for sure. And especially like I find epic fantasy has been or fantasy in general has been such a huge love of mine for so long. And putting out Bloodstones was so exciting because this was my first one and it's my love letter to the genre and all of the things that I love the most about storytelling. And then I was committed. And now with book 2, like we talk about second book syndrome a lot because all of a sudden I'm like, oh shoot, now I have to do it again. And it has to be like raising the bar and it has to, and that's why don't rush it. Like I'm trying to let it marinate and find the story that I really want to tell and make sure that I'm proud of it 5 years down the road.
Yeah, and you have to remember that, like, most people will consume that thing all at once. Like, they'll read book 1. They're not going to read them on release,
Right.
So you got to get it right. You don't need to rush out for that second.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is true to some degree, Shad, but I think it's a like short game versus long game approach. So for me, like in 5 to 6 years, I should have a finished trilogy. I will have a duology. I will have potentially a few books out in my fantasy Western series. So I'm playing the long game of like at some point when people find me as an author, they'll have a whole bunch of like finished or established things to different entry points. But yeah, like in the short term, yeah, that's true to some extent. But
yeah, I think the word usually saves that statement.
Yeah. Ryan Skeffington is another indie author, and yeah, it is epic fantasy is exhausting to write mentally. Yeah, it's amazing and I love it, but
I mean, and that is another thing is like, I understand the frustration with something like A Song of Ice and Fire taking a long time to come out. I understand it's never going to be finished, whatever, but like it's also really difficult to write. Like people, like there's a reason why it's epic, and for all those strings to come together, and it's not an easy thing to do. So that might be another reason why you see like less people writing it as well. It's just
it takes a lot out of you.
Manageable, especially when people are looking at saying, and they have a publisher or whatever, they have their own idea that they want to publish a book every year. Maybe that's not the way to go. It might be better to write a cozy bookshop fantasy or something.
To Shad's point too, I mean, if you're coming into it where like I'm lucky enough to have a husband with a full-time job, and I also obviously as a mom have a full-time job, but I'm not trying to support my family with my writing. I would like to get to that point at some point. But if you're coming in and you're like, I'm going to start making money, that's a very specific road that you have to walk. And it's not guaranteed. Like it is actually, if you're literally like, I want to support my family, writing books is probably not where you should start. Because it is really hard to get to that point, even for, a lot of big name traditional published authors.
If it's funny, like sometimes like when I read Tat or something, I think about like, what if I wrote an epic fantasy? But ultimately, I really just want to write stories about dudes like going to 7-Eleven and something weird happening, and then them going back home being like, that was weird. Like that's basically all I want to write. Yeah.
Would you do short stories?
Yeah, I'm more drawn to short stories. Yeah. I think on the whole, short stories are way tighter and better, like technically written.
They're hard to write.
Yeah. I mean, you really have to make every single word count. Working within restrictions usually breeds excellency for the most part. So I think that's something I'm interested in. I also just think short fiction in general is totally underrepresented and underread. I'm reading through Vonnegut's collection, Welcome to the Monkey House. It's awesome. Chekhov's awesome. Tolstoy's short stuff. I've consumed all of it, I think.
Yeah.
At this point, King short stories. I'm reading through You Like It Darker right now. It's awesome. George R. R. Martin short story. Like I really like short stories. I think people kind of underrate them because they feel
I
like it's
agree.
not this big epic, you know, probably a fantasy fan issue because we like chunkers. But.
Yeah, but I think also like to tell a really compelling contained story in a short story format is really difficult. Like I was in an anthology that came out last December and had to write within 5,500 to 6,000 words a short fantasy story to put in the anthology, and I was really challenged by that. I was like, okay, this is like a whole different going from my 150,000 word epic to I have this much space, and that's what I got.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really good exercise for me.
Yeah. I mean, Erickson started out as a short fiction writer, and that's why Malazan has so much packed into it in little things that people can draw on and reread, because really it's a bunch of short stories.
Yeah. I'm reading my first King this year, potentially.
What are you going to read?
So I had been recommended the ones that everyone recommends, which is The Stand and It. Which I was always like, I don't know if yeah. And so I talked to a couple of friends who are have read a lot more Stephen King than I have, and the two that kind of came to the top of the pile were Doomakey and Needful Things.
I've heard both are excellent. I've not read either. I'm reading
Billy Summers was also one that I found and was kind of intrigued by the premise of that one. But yeah,
I don't know about I don't know if I've heard anything good about Billy Summers, but I also don't know if I know a ton of people who have read it. I'm reading You Like It Darker. His new collection just came out, and I've only read the first short story in it, which is about 60 pages, and it was really good. I really liked it. Not amazing, but like really good.
Nice.
Pet Sematary is a good place I don't know if I recommend that to you, though.
That's one that I have put on my absolutely I could not read this.
Yeah, King says it's his darkest book he's ever read. Yeah, and I think it's one of the hardest books I've read. It's also one of the best books I've ever read. That's my favorite King. 11/22/63 and that are my favorites.
This is another one that came up in the discussion.
Dude, 11/22/63 is amazing. Yeah. Like amazing.
Sal, it's called The Advent of Winter. It was an advent calendar style anthology where there were 24 indie artists that did a short story a day in December from the 1st to the 24th. And yeah, you can get the just regular version of it now, I think, on Amazon. But if you go to my Goodreads page, it's listed under my works.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, basically our only thing was it has to be something about how winter is either beautiful or dangerous and horrible. And as you might imagine, as a bunch of fantasy writers, then we were like, oh, shoot, we should probably put like a slightly more cozy one on Christmas Eve. And we were looking through the list like,
we might have missed the tone on this one.
Right. So, but yeah, well, I mean, we've been talking for 3 hours, so I don't want to take up a whole lot more of your time. So I want to first of all say thank you for spending 3 hours on my channel and hanging out to chat. This was a blast.
Anytime. I'm always happy to come on and chat with you. I can't believe it's been 1.5 years since you were on Chatting Nights. It's a long time.
It was really funny because I went back and watched it, like I said, and like in the first, I was like, I was so nervous, and it cracked me up, like watching myself at the very beginning, because I could tell I was like, yep, I remember being like, oh my gosh.
It's so funny because I don't think I picked up on that at all. So you hit it well.
Being in public speaking at a very young age helped with that.
Okay.
I can hide it pretty well. I think it was because it's not necessarily like the specific channel. It's like anytime I was on a new channel with somebody that I hadn't talked to a lot before, I would get a lot more nervous than I do now. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever been like stage fright on BookTube or anything, but there are some times you're not sure, like especially whenever you're randomly introducing yourself to someone for the very first time, about to talk to them for 2.5, 3 hours, that you're like, okay, is this going to go well?
Right, exactly. Am I going to get along with this person? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, and for the most part, it almost always goes well, because at the end of the day, we can always rely on, what are you reading?
Yep. Yeah. What's your favorite book series?
Yeah. It's on the
Yeah.
TBR.
What's your
It's up
top
next.
10?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really appreciate you coming on Motley Crew, and I appreciate all your recs. I am really excited to get to Tad Williams, and when I do, I will probably message you extensively as I'm reading it with all of my thoughts. So, chat, you guys are awesome. Thanks for joining us. Jimmy, thanks for joining me on the channel.
Thanks for having me. I always appreciate it. Thanks, chat.
See you guys in the next video. Have a good night.